Now, many years, mangoes and the knowledge of mangoes in the country, in the market, was mangoes coming from the coastal region. Embedodo. Limekoma.
Yes, yes. I don't anything on the song.
Go on.
Imelala mchangani.
And then we started now seeing other regions producing mangoes in greater numbers. And then we go to a point where, in fact, nowadays, people from the lower eastern, where the president will be visiting, there's a time when they are the most sought after neighbors and friends in the country. Why? Because it's mango season. And mangoes from especially Kitui, Makueni, and some parts of Ukambani, sweet mangoes. But mangoes are also grown in other parts of the country. The issue, though, is, are we producing enough mangoes to meet the demand locally? Are we producing enough mangoes to meet the export demand? Are farmers getting the benefit of their mango trees? Are farmers being able to produce mangoes, to harvest mangoes, and to take the mangoes to the market without the mangoes getting spoiled? People will tell you, we get to a certain point where they tell you, just come and collect the mangoes. Why? Because they're rotting here. How do we help our farmers to make sure that they manage their crop and also manage the fruit when it's going to the market? Joining us for this conversation is somebody who's an expert on not mangoes, but on the management side. Because what eats the mangoes is the insects. And this person is an expert on matters of insects. He is Dr. Shepard Ndlela from the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, ICIPE. Dr. Ndlela, welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you on the show. We call that the hot seat. We just warm it up for you so that we can have a good conversation. Tell us about ICIPE, first of all. Insect physiology, ecology. Sounds like what Hillary went to study. Rocket science.
That's a very big institution. A very big institution in the sense that it's one of those institutions in the world that deals with insect pests in the context of 4 themes, namely plant health, animal health, human health, and environmental health. So I come from plant health, specifically where we look at insect pests that are a menace to men in terms of plants. Yes.
The question that comes to my mind when I think of insects, in fact, the word pests, what is implied in that word is they are bothersome. They are not useful. But a little reading tells me that insects are not always bothersome or unuseful. Insects can be useful. Now, when we talk about the subject of mangoes that we're going to get towards, I'm sure in ICIPE, you also look at the positive sides or the positive part that insects play in food production.
Indeed, there are many projects that are in ICIPE.
Yes.
I might not be able to go deeper into these projects,
yes,
as there are also other specialists who deal with those.
Yes.
But on the positive side of it, we can talk of pollinators, talk of bees. We have a whole department in environmental health who are dealing with bees. On the positive side of insects in terms of feed, we also have experts who are dealing with those insects in terms of how can insects be harnessed into food, how can insects be harnessed into animal feed, how can insects be harnessed into plant nutrition, for example, fertilizers, all those kind of things. There are people who are looking into those issues.
So, Dr. Ndlela, what exactly is your work? What does it involve? And then how is this directly connected to mango farming in Kenya?
Like I said, I'm coming from plant health in ICIPE. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow. I'm working on post-harvest systems together with other things that we do in ICIPE. First of all, let me try to link what we are doing to mango production. I'll start with the formation of the African Fruit Fly Initiative way back in the 90s formed as a result of cries by farmers. What can we do? We have insect pests that are making life unbearable for us. We have mangoes, we are producing mangoes, but nothing is coming out of it. Hence, the African Fruit Fly Initiative was formed, which later changed into the African Fruit Fly Program, AFFP. Why change into AFFP into a program instead of an initiative? We are now looking at different aspects, not only fruit flies, because when we go to mango, there are many constraints that affect the production of mangoes. For example, we have diseases. For example, we have other insect pests which are not fruit flies. Talk of thrips, talk of mango seed weevil, talk of mealybugs. All those are insect pests that affect mangoes. So we wanted to look at the mango production holistically from all angles. But today I'm here specifically on fruit flies. But the most important thing that I'm stressing is that this is a program, an initiative which started from the farmers. Hence, even what we are doing today, it has to have the farmer inside. Whatever we develop is participatory. The farmer is part of it. We do not develop solutions that we hand over to the farmer, but we work hand in glove with the farmers to develop solutions according to their context, according to their need. Hence, we are here dealing with the fruit fly.
Dr. Ndlela, is the fruit fly the same? The fruit fly that you'll find maybe in the coastal area, the same one that you're going to find in the highlands?
Someone might ask that why fruit fly? What has changed? What's so spectacular about talking about fruit fly, fruit fly, fruit fly? Let me take it from a bigger angle so that we understand this. Many people don't understand this. I will take it from a biblical point of view, the point of creation. When God created the heavens and the earth, he also created fruit flies. So it does not mean that in Africa or in Kenya we did not have fruit flies. We had fruit flies. There are fruit flies called Serratitis. There are fruit flies called Duckus. These, God created them and put them in Africa. Then he created some other fruit flies which are called Bactrocera. These, he placed them in Asia. Right. Let me take it from this angle. The Serratitis species which were in Africa, these are native to Africa. They are also here in Kenya. They are in the coast, they are in eastern, they are in central. They were created here. At that particular time when they were created up to a certain point, around 2003, out of every 100 mangoes that a farmer would produce, Serratitis, which is native to Africa, which was also native to Kenya, was destroying at least between 20 to 30 mangoes. That is up to 2003. But what happened in 2003? Something new. A species which was not in Africa, which originated in Asia. God had placed it in Asia. But because of many things, transport, people are moving from Asia to Africa. We are also trading with those people. And also flight, climate change. All those things are happening. We had the fruit fly pest Bactrocera dorsalis, by then called Bactrocera invadens. It was first detected in the coastal regions of Kenya. So we don't know how it entered, but that was the point where it was detected. What did it do? It suddenly increased the damage levels in mango. What was it causing? Out of every 100 mangoes that a farmer would produce, Bactrocera dorsalis would destroy 80 of them, meaning that you are left with only 20 mangoes. So you will see that the indigenous species of fruit flies, which we had naturally, in as much as they were causing menace to men, they were not so much. But when Bactrocera dorsalis came, everything ballooned. Everything was blown out of proportion. Yes.
And is it around the same time when we see the introduction of this new species in this country that then now we also see that there is then the inability to keep up with production? Because a large number, in terms of percentage, that is being destroyed by this fruit fly.
So when I talk about Bactrocera dorsalis invading Africa, but the first point being Kenya in 2003, I'm talking about a completely new thing that we did not know. So people were overwhelmed. How do we control this one? Now, what happens, one may ask, why was Ceratitis not causing so much problems? It is because Ceratitis corsera had natural enemies, or in the field when you go, there are some things that control Ceratitis corsera because they developed together. Over the course of the years when they were created, they were together. They know how to control each other and check the population dynamics. When the pest goes up, the natural enemy goes down, those dynamics. But now, enter Bactrocera dorsalis. It did not come with its natural enemies. Hence, it was causing so much harm. Right. So this is a time when the farmers are saying, how do we control this one? So the first thing that they did was to pump so much chemicals. But there comes a point when the chemicals cannot help you anymore. And again, this is the time we see the lucrative export markets, Europe, the USA. You know, they have what they call maximum residue levels.
Yep.
When we export, whatever we are exporting to the Europeans, to the Americans, they check the chemical levels. They can tell. When they have your mango there, they can tell you sprayed A, B, C, D. It's all inside. So in short, I'm saying chemicals that are sprayed are inside the food and they can be traced. So they came up with maximum residue levels. And it was seen that these mangoes that we are exporting, not only from Kenya, but from all over Africa, they had high levels of chemicals. They said, no, we don't need your mangoes. Sell them elsewhere, because the chemicals are not good for us.
Yeah.
We were left with nothing. We were left now on the drawing board. This is the point when now the farmers came to ICIPE and said, ICIPE, you deal with insects. How can we control?
Deal with this particular one.
Yes.
Let's bring in this conversation, at that point in the conversation, somebody from the agency in government that is responsible for checking as we export produce out of this country, the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service. And the Chief Inspector in the Phytosanitary Division, George Momanyi, joins us on the line. Good morning, George.
Good morning.
Good to have you on the show, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, you've had the background that Dr. Ndlela has given us so well that, get to understand the Ceratitis and the Bactrocera dorsalis and all that, and the impact that it has had. And then getting to a point where the export market banned the export of our mangoes. As KEFIS and the work that you do, just give us the impact that such decisions have on the exporters.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. First, I would start by saying that KEFIS is a government parastatal whose responsibility is to assure the quality of agricultural inputs and produce to prevent adverse impact on the economy, the environment, and human health. So we basically do what you mentioned, phytosanitary services, that is regulation of imports and exports. But your question more borders on the export aspect, where we assure compliance with import requirements of our trading partners. So when this issue of Bactrocera came in, a lot of markets got sensitive with our products because they didn't want us to export infested fruits to their countries. So this led to what we call export restrictions to our produce. And the onus was on us to prove to the rest of our trading partners that we are able to manage that fruit fly. For your information, we do have inspectors at the entry point and exit, and the work is to inspect the material that is leaving the country. But the challenge with this fruit fly is you can hardly see it visually. When you are inspecting a mature hard mango, which is to be exported, you'll hardly know there are some eggs that have been laid inside that fruit. So you can easily assure something that has some eggs inside, and then it ends up hatching once it gets to the other hand, and then that's how the interceptions come about. So then what the challenge has been is that when we would do that fisher inspection, we would still end up with some of those interceptions coming. And it reached a point in 2014 when we felt, okay, this doesn't seem to be working very well for the EU market. We said, wait a minute, instead of us getting a ban from the EU because our products are not good enough, let's on our own account do a self-ban, whereby now we'll take time because we're not able to assure quality at the exit points. We needed to go to the farmer level and do farm certification, where we work with the farmers, with the exporters to make sure that they're able to manage the fruit fly at the farm level. And then we do that certification such that by the time it's reaching the entry point, exit point, and prior to the export, then it's in a good condition. So those are the interventions we've been doing with farmers, making sure that that product is complying before we would be able to resume the exports. And basically that's how we've been working closely with ICIPE. They've also been developing a lot of technologies by virtue of them being in research. They have a lot of integrated pest management options for the fruit fly. So ours has been working with them in terms of sensitizing farmers and also encouraging the farmers to implement those integrated pest management measures. And once we do our monitoring and find out that those interventions are working, then our work then would be just to assure compliance in the export. So briefly, that's what we've been doing with the farmers.
Thank you very much, Mamanya. And I think that's also a good way to approach it. Start at the production level. Coming back to you, Dr. Ndlela. So you have noticed that this is happening, that farmers went ahead and started spraying too much chemical, and then they came to you and they said, help us. What interventions then do you come up with?
There are various interventions that we came up with. First, maybe we have to understand what the fruit fly does. Like George has said, the fruit fly on its back, it has a pointed structure, which is like an injection. When it goes to a mango, it injects eggs inside the mango. So sometimes, in most cases, we just eat the eggs. When these eggs are inside the mango, they hatch.
City has just
they become
a
maggots.
visual.
These maggots start moving inside as they are feeding.
Right.
By the time sometimes we consume the maggots are still small. But there comes a point when the maggots are big and they've caused so much damage and they pop out, they go into the soil. Right. So we had to look at the life cycle. We have to study the pest first. Because like I said, Bactrocera dorsalis was new to us. By then it was called Bactrocera invadens. It later changed the name to Bactrocera dorsalis. We had to look at all stages of development and try to look at the weakest link where we can strike the pest. ICIPE, together with regional, national, international partners, we developed what we are calling an integrated pest management package for the fruit fly in mango. First, we have what is called male annihilation. Male annihilation, in simple terms, we are saying in the orchard, we are removing the males. We use an attractant, which is called methyl-eugenol. This is one of the most powerful attractants known to men. It can attract fruit fly to a range of as much as 1 kilometer away. So when you put these traps with methyl-eugenol, we use it in traps, it attracts only the males in your farm or in your place. In short, we are saying the females are left behind without males. Whatever eggs that they will lay are not fertilized. So there is no development. So in short, over time, we will knock down the population of fruit flies. That's smell annihilation.
Is there any benefit that this insect offers at all? Because it looks as though, or because, they say some are good for one or the other, right? Is there any benefit that this has so that it could then point to the cost that is being taken now to basically annihilate them completely? Any benefit that they offer at all that one would say, well, if you're destroying this, you're destroying a population that could essentially form some kind of benefit for nature and the environment? Is there benefit at all?
From the point of Bactrocera dorsalis, it is offering us nothing except tears.
Okay.
Although there are some fruit flies which are pollinators.
Right.
But this particular one that we are talking about, all it is giving us tears.
This attractant, is it only attracting the male Bactrocera dorsalis, or is this also attracting the male of our indigenous fruit fly?
It is so specific to Bactrocera. It will not attract any other fruit flies. But now, in as much as we have Bactrocera dorsalis, we still have to control even the native ones. This is why we have developed a technology called baiting. Baiting is specifically food. As fruit flies are developing, they need protein in their bodies. We have developed this protein that we give or we toxify it. We mix it with chemicals. But now it is different from spraying because we are only mixing and applying this protein pesticide mixture on only 1 square meter of the tree instead of spraying the whole tree. And again, we are not spraying on the mangoes, we are spraying on the tree trunk or on the leaves. So baiting now, this is protein. All fruit flies, whether they are these indigenous ones, whether they are these that came from Asia, they will go to this protein source because it is food. When they eat this, they die. So we are hitting Bactrocera dorsalis. This one now hits the males and the females.
Interesting. Is Bactrocera dorsalis as harmful to the fruits in Asia where it came from?
Indeed, it is harmful. But because it has those natural enemies which are co-evolved with the pest there, it might not be as much as what it is doing in Africa. But realizing that there is this link between co-evolved natural enemies, we call them the farmers' friends. ICIPE with other partners, we went to Asia and said, okay, what are these natural enemies that are helping the Asians? We brought those natural enemies. We have 2 natural enemies. They are big names. Diacas morphalongicodata, it is a natural enemy or a farmer's friend. Phopias aricenas, another farmer's friend. But now the difference is that Phopias aricenas, what it does now when we release it, we are producing these at ICIPE in millions. We have been releasing them in Kenya. We have released them in Tanzania. We have released them in the whole of Africa. Now we are in Southern Africa. We are releasing them there. Why? Phopias aricenas, when it is released, it goes into the farm, it goes to the infested mangoes. It uses its antenna and the feet to find out where the fruit fly larvae are inside the mango. Then it also have a long injection. Once it knows that, okay, there is an egg here. So Phopias aricenas controls the eggs of the fruit fly. Diacas morphalongicodata controls the maggots. It injects its egg inside the egg of the fruit fly. Now, whatever escapes at this egg stage, Diacas morpha comes later now. It looks for the maggots, the eggs that are hatched into the maggots, which are now eating the mango. It also removes its injection. It goes to the maggot. It places its egg inside the maggot. So there's no development. At the end of the day, we are saying the fruit fly will not develop to adult stage. The life cycle is cut there. So already I've talked about 3 methods that we are using. Male annihilation, we're removing the males. Baiting, this is food, we're removing both the males and the females. The parasitoid or the natural enemy or the farmer's friend, it is removing the eggs of the fruit fly as well as the maggots. So these are some of the strategies that we are using.
After the break, you'll tell us the benefits that now we've started seeing since the program was launched, the African Fruit Fly Program. that's launched by various organizations, but also being spearheaded by ICIPE, the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology. We are talking about mangoes. When you hear all those things that Dr. Ndlolo is talking about, Ndlela is talking about, Bactoceras dorsalis, and we are talking about mangoes. Just the bottom line is mango and management of mango, pre-harvest and post-harvest. Dr. Shepard Ndlela is from ICIPE, and also on the line with us is George Momanyi, who's the Chief Inspector at KEFIS, the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service. Time for us to take a break at 27 minutes to 8. This conversation continues shortly after the break. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your 24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is SpiceFM.
Losing a loved one is never easy. The lingering memories, the what-ifs, but in all the gloom, we find ways of celebrating them. And here at the Standard Tributes, we aim to give your loved ones that befitting send-off. Visit www.standardmedia.co.ke/tributes today and post your loved one's tribute. In addition, get access to funeral services from our trusted vendors. The Standard Tributes, keeping memories alive.
24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is SpiceFM.
Exciting soccer action from the round of 25 of the Bet King Premier League as the race for the championship continues. This week Friday, FC Leopards vs Bandari. On Saturday, Kakamega Homeboys vs Matare. And on Sunday, KCB meets Tusker FC. All the games will be played at 3:15 p.m. Catch these exciting matches on BTV, Channel 172 on aerial decoder and 463 on satellite. Get connected to StarTimes for only 999 shillings on aerial decoder or 2,699 shillings on satellite. StarTimes, the home of the Bet King Premier League.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul,
Nairobi at
and
14, highs of 19 today. Light rain in Nyeri at 13 with highs of 19. 23 will be the high in Nakuru, where it's also raining at 15. We're looking at rain showers in Eldoret at 14 now, highs of 21 and lows of 12. It's also raining in Kisumu at 20 with highs of 27 and lows of 19. Mostly cloudy conditions in Kakamega at 20 with highs of 25. It'll come down to lows of 15. 22 will be the low in Mombasa, where it's raining at 24. We'll go to highs of 28. Those are the numbers we're also looking at in Malindi, where it's mostly sunny for now at 24. And 26 will be the high in Kampala, where it's partly sunny at 20. We're looking at mostly cloudy conditions at 23 in Dar es Salaam with highs of 29. It'll come down to lows of 22. Clear conditions in Johannesburg at 9, highs of 16 and lows of 7. And we're looking at light rain now in Lagos at 25 with highs of 30. It'll come down to lows of 24. 21 will be the low in Kinshasa, where it's clear at 19. It'll go to highs of 30.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM.
All right, we're still being given warnings about that ICD route this morning, guys. Just follow the traffic. Coming out at Liberal House, if you do try to overlap, you will be busted this morning. So please do not. Just follow the route and you should be fine with that. Slight accident off Karen Road this morning. It's not causing too much traffic, but just watch out for that as you're headed in that direction. Uhuru Highway, we're still looking at slowdown as you're going in and out of the city. We're looking at also traffic around Aerodrome, Langata Road, the roundabout, then heading towards Bagavi Way. It's a bit slow there, but nothing too crazy this morning, which is a good thing. Let's keep an eye on things. SpiceFMKE on Twitter. Talk to us there. Text us on 40127.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
The conversation continues. In the Situation Room is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko, C.T. Muga, and Dr. Shepard Ndlela from ICIPE. Joining us on the line is George Momanyi. He's a Chief Inspector in the Phytosanitary Division at KEFIS. KEFIS is the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service. It's a government agency that looks at the health of our plants, just to speak directly. We're having a conversation about mangoes, okay? So farmers have been growing mangoes for many years in this country. Farmers have been selling mangoes to the local market, to the export market. And for many years, mangoes have basically been dealing with fruit flies. And Mwalimu has been telling us, now Dr. Shepard Nlela is our Mwalimu, the scientist in the house. He's been telling us about the history. So we have had some insects, fruit flies that are indigenous to Africa and these parts of the world. Those ones have lived with us for a long time. And during the time when they were the only ones in the region, farmers would get about 20 to 30% losses because of the fruit fly. And then come in this new century, and some fruit flies that are resident in Asian countries found their way into our countries, and these ones are bad, and they've ended up pushing the losses to about 80%. Out of every 100 mangoes harvested by a farmer, 80 would actually just go bad.
And
so
we call them invasive.
They're invasive.
Yeah.
So the scientists at ICIPE plus the experts at KEFIS were approached by farmers, and they have been working now with the farmers on how to help manage pre-harvest management and post-harvest treatment of mangoes so that we ensure that farmers get the most out of their mango. Now, there's all the work that you've told us that you've been doing, Dr. Nlela. So there's the attracting of the male species. There's all these other things that you've told us that the baiting and the introducing of the parasitoids.
Yes.
Right? What impact has that had since you started this program? When you were starting, farmers were getting 80% of their fruits destroyed. What's the current situation?
Okay, before I go to that, like I said, it's a package. On top of the three that I explained, we also have biopesticides. ICIPE is known for developing these technologies. Biopesticides, when you leave your bread for a long time or you gully and you put it aside, after a few days you see something growing out of it, that is fungus. In nature, we also have fungus which are out there, which we have harnessed, and we have seen that they are able, when they are sprayed on the insects, they also are able to kill the fruit flies. If we spray these, they kill the soil-dwelling stage of the insect. Like I said, after eating the mango, the mangoes drop to the ground. That's where they meet now. These are biopesticides, which is very much environmentally friendly. We have also been encouraging sanitation. We have what we call an augmentorium. This is a tent-like structure which when farmers use, they put the rotting mangoes, the infested mangoes inside, and the fruit flies die inside. Because we've been releasing the natural enemy, the farmer's friend, the tent-like structure allows these small insects to come out and go again into the farm and do business. So we have seen farmers adopting these technologies and using them in their farms, and the success has been tremendous. What is mostly used by farmers is male annihilation. This technique where they use the attractant together with the traps. Why? We've been asking around. They like this technology because they see the results. When you put a trap, this is just a small bucket. You can even use anything, a water bottle, anything that you can use. Just put that attractant inside, the fruit flies will come inside. So they like this technology because they can see, you can get thousands and thousands. It can even fill maybe a kg or so of fruit flies can go into that bucket. So they can actually see the effect of the technology and they testify that it is working. All these technologies are available in Kenya, and farmers have been using them, they have been adopting them. The only problem probably that is remaining right now is for the farmers to adopt this technology at area-wide. Because if farmer A is using and farmer B is not using, that one we are fighting a losing battle. What we need is to have everyone in an area using these technologies so that they are complementary. So the farmers are not obliged to use everything that I've talked about. You can choose at least 2 or 3 compatible technologies. And if you look at what I've said, we are trying by all means to reduce the amount of pesticides that farmers are pumping into the ecosystems. We know very well the negative effects of pesticides, be it on human health, be it on animal health, be it on service pollinators. All those are affected by chemicals. And in any case, the market where we are aiming to send our mangoes, they do not want these pesticides. So we are encouraging farmers use to at least 3 of these technologies, and they have been using, they are adopting, and we have several companies in Nairobi who are providing these technologies at a cost. People can buy. The technologies that we develop as ICIPE together with partners, we take it to the private sector, and they're able to give them out.
I'm a bit puzzled because the harmful effects of pesticides is known. The effectiveness or the lack of adequate effectiveness of some of these pesticides also known. Why then do farmers continue using them?
Pesticides are readily available. If you look at recent years, the production of pesticides in Asia, for example, China, production costs have really gone down, and production is actually easier to do. And most of these pesticides find their way into Africa. And if you go out into any of these dukas, you would find that there is something that a farmer can afford. And these people are also so vigorous in their marketing. They are there within the farmers. They are telling them, buy this, buy that, buy that. And even the farmers themselves have gone to an extent of taking pesticides that are not meant for fruit flies and spraying. So it's about what is available to me. So it is also a challenge to us. It is a challenge to the service providers to make sure that these fruit fly technologies, which are environmentally friendly, which are good to human beings, are readily available. If they are available in Nairobi, what about someone who is down in the interior of Eastern, Western? They need all those things. We have been working with these companies so that they decentralize. They make sure that these technologies are available to the farmer.
Mr. Momanyi, what have we seen then in terms of an improvement? If we're looking at 2003 and then further on, where we saw about 80% from, 100 mangoes is being destroyed. With these technologies and with these findings, have we been able to see an improvement on crop production in the last few years or since then?
There is an improvement.
Yeah.
Yes, George, go ahead.
There is indeed some improvement because I would mention about an area-wide initiative that has been running for the last couple of years, 2 years or so, in Makueni, and we've been basically monitoring the situation where we put some of those traps just to check whether those fruit flies are there. And when we've tried to check on those areas where the campaigns are being held, where they are deploying most of those technologies, indeed you find that there's very little infestation, and in some cases you don't even find those fruit flies at all. So indeed, I would say yes, there's an impact in areas whereby all the farmers have been sensitized to apply the technologies. But again, what I would say is the challenge most of the farmers in other areas have had is whereby one farmer deploys the technology, the others are not doing, so you find that the population still remain very high when not everyone is adapting the technologies. So then if we go the line of area-wide management and also engaging all the stakeholders to really make the process sustainable, there's really good hope. At the moment in that Makueni area where there's a lot of campaigns, we've been monitoring around 4,000 farmers and we have the confidence that from that area, indeed, yes, we can have very good mangoes, which would then be certified for export to the EU.
But Momanyi, as I listen to what you're saying and also what Dr. Ndlela is saying, it's important to have that area-wide management, having all farmers in a specific area buy in to these methods. This is a campaign that's been going on for years. As we stand today, agriculture is a devolved function. Are you working with the county governments to sensitize farmers to adopt these practices? And what are these challenges that are making farmers, not all farmers, buy into this particular program?
Yeah, indeed, that's a good question. Indeed, there's really critical need to partner with the county government, given that agriculture is now a devolved function. And maybe if I can give the example of the Makueni, the county government of Makueni has participated in that fruit fly management initiative. And several players, including KEFIS and ICIPE and others, have been giving the technical backstopping on what needs to be done. So then the county government has been very supportive in distribution of those products and technologies, the sensitization aspects, and they're also developing regulations, because sometimes some of the people are just difficult. Some people may have 2 mangoes, others have 10, others have more commercial farming. So those people who are doing farming as a business are more serious on the management. But that's others who are doing a hobby, they don't really care whether they are fruit flies or not. So those are some of the nitty-gritties that make it very difficult for the area-wide management. But with the government, with the county government coming in, the county government can do bylaws. So everyone is bound to do what is expected at that level. And when there is that proper enforcement on the ground, somebody commits an offense if he doesn't do some of those operational aspects. So then that's the direction it's taking. And once the county government buys in and also engages the farmers on the ground, then there is not really a bigger challenge. But in a way, I would say the issue about farming as opposed to other countries is whereby we have all sizes of farmers. We have the large scale, we have the medium scale, we have the small scale. All of them are really called farmers, but their objectives are different. So putting them on the same, some may not even be able to afford the products. They're not serious on the farming. So even if you have technologies, they may not be willing to buy, or even if they bought them, they may not have ready market. There's issues about aggregation of the products, having good market for those mangoes and all that. So those initiatives are being taken up as a whole package, as a value chain approach. And we've seen that if we take the value chain approach, where we look through all the players in the system and engage them, and every person does their part, then we're likely to have a positive result.
How close does the government work with ICIPE?
As close as can be, because I represent the government, and ICIPE, we work together. When they have this project, we get involved. Personally, I've been involved in the fruit fly project they've had for mangoes, where I was in their technical advisory committee and even the steering committee. So they quite involve the government, because the projects come and go, but then the government is what really needs to come in to see how the technologies are later deployed to the farmers, and also the aspect of sustainability. So indeed, we've been working closely. They don't work on their own, and I think they're also getting some funding, like the tax waivers from the government. So then we see ourselves as really a team and the collaborators.
Right. I think that was going towards my next question. Maybe also Dr. Ndlela can help out here as well. So one of the big issues for agriculture practitioners across the country is the cost of resources, the cost of raw materials and such inputs. A big deal when we are looking at this. So looking at this as an added technology that essentially is going to save a crop, how expensive is it for them? Or are we looking at, it being subsidized for farmers? Because it has been a bane of the cry for a very, very long time that we can't afford to remain in this practice?
As far as fruit fly management is concerned, as more players are coming in the provision of these technologies that I've talked about, the price is also going down. And as we see more and more companies which provide these services, decentralizing, going into the interior, we have more and more farmers accessing these products and applying in their cropping system.
But comparatively, if you look at now these technologies in integrated pest management, if you compare this with the pesticides, which is more expensive to the farmer? Which one is going to cost more for the farmer?
Cost can be taken into...
I'm looking at it just literally. How much is a farmer going to cough out to manage their mango crops using IPM versus how much they would cough out just going to the next agrovet and buying some pesticide?
IPM is easier because it is to your advantage. It is healthy. And we are talking about several components that you can, if you don't afford this, you take the other one. If you don't afford this, if you afford this at this particular time and in 2 months' time you can afford this, you see, it's a mix. You just choose. So it's according to your pocket. And I'm sure that is something that farmers can really ride on and say, we have been given options to choose from this and this and this. Whatever is doing, whatever is affordable, we can use.
All right. So I'm looking at it now from the angle of, we have, like Momanyi has explained, we have the small-scale farmer who basically just has a mango tree in their compound, in their farm. And then there's somebody who has done this commercially, a medium-scale farmer to large-scale farmer. They're doing this commercially. The small-scale person does not have the incentive to invest in any of these pest control measures. Is there a role that maybe government, that maybe cooperatives can come in so that we get everybody on board? Because just like you're saying, if one of them is not on board, the efforts of everybody else are basically at risk.
We are looking at the whole production system holistically. If you look at what we have been talking about, it's about people. We have the local market. People are selling locally, but how much are they getting? We have people, they are sending their mangoes to Middle East. How much are they getting? So if we look at this holistically, we look at the big guys. If they are able to export their crop, this is much better. It cascades down. Because if, for example, the medium producer, he is able to buy from the small guys and he can export. But for now, he cannot export. We need to break into the export market, the lucrative export market, Europe, the USA. This is why we have come up with a technology. Now moving away from pre-harvest, that is before harvest, going to post-harvest. Yes. In post, okay.
No, you just finished.
Okay, in post-harvest, we have what we are calling hot water treatment. Right. All this that we have talked about will reduce the fruit fly infestation, but will not get rid of the fruit fly in the mangoes. What the exporter wants, the person who is sitting in Europe, because they are saying, these pests that we have are quarantined. We do not have them in Europe, and we do not want a chance of these pests coming to Europe. So you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that your produce that you are sending to Europe does not have fruit flies. This is why since 2014, Momanyi said from the KEFI side, they have come up with a self-ban. They said to themselves, we are not going to export until we put our house in order. And that putting the house in order is now. ICIPE being helped by several organizations currently with funds from BioInnovate Africa through CEDA. We have developed this hot water treatment. Hot water treatment, in short, we are saying, we have applied all these technologies and still we think there could be fruit flies inside. Let's subject these mangoes to hot water treatment. We heat water. This protocol that we have developed has even been accepted by the European Union. So it's up to Kenya now to implement the technology and export. We heat our water 46.1 degrees Celsius. We dip our mangoes for 68 minutes. And this offers quarantine treatment. This is an experiment that has been going for many years, trying this and that. So we are happy to announce that hot water treatment is the future of post-harvest treatment, and it gives that assurance that this mango that I am exporting does not have fruit flies. And Europe is ready for our mangoes.
Mwalimu, you have given us a lot of information today, and we thank you very much. Mwalimu Dr. Shepard Nlela is from ICIPE. He is a scientist. He understands the issues of insects very well, as you've heard. And also joining us is George Momanyi. He's a chief inspector in the Phytosanitary Division of Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, who's joined us on the line. Momanyi, also thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
And just before you go, Momanyi, is there are these measures that you're taking, to ensure that the fruits that we export out of the country, or are they also being employed to ensure that the fruits that we eat in the country are safe?
Okay, I would say that at national level, yes, we have standards that ought to be followed, and we do also have a laboratory that tests the residues. But challenges about local is now the enforcement, because we don't really have capacity on the ground to be monitoring what people are selling in markets. And some of our members are also unscrupulous. You spray today, even when you had needed to have those pre-harvest intervals followed. Some of them may not be following. So what we've done is to come up with some regulations. There's some regulations we are putting up in place so that it makes enforcement easier. So that if you found you're not complying with this, it's an offense, and then it becomes easier now to stop those unscrupulous practices.
Thank you very much. We'll have a conversation about that as well, on food safety and ensuring food safety in the country. George Momanyi from KEFIS and Dr. Shepard Nlela from ICIPE, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Keep it right here. Conversations continue into the next hour and going all the way up to 10 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. We are in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. We are worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke, and we live stream the show as well on social media platforms SpiceFM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. In the next hour, our guest host, John Sibiokumu, gets back into the studio, and the question is, who is a Kenyan? Good morning. It's now 8 a.m.
Spice up your life.
Aimed at filling 4 IEBC commissioners' positions enters its second day today. Caroline Nganga is scheduled to be interviewed at 9:30 a.m. before handing over to Dr. Catherine Kamindo. Cecilia Ngoyoni will be the last to be interviewed today at 2 p.m. Abdirazak Arule Nuno and Anne Mwikali were interviewed yesterday.
If you were to join the commission as a member of the body, what would you do to fight for the integrity and independence of that commission?
First of all, the issue of independence is best felt at the level of resourcing. If you are not financially independent, your independence will always be pulled down.
The results management was an issue because technology failed. So I'd suggest that we improve on the technology.
Residents of Jasho area in Uasin Gishu County who surrendered their properties to give way for the construction of the Eldoret bypass are demanding that among the conversations when President Uhuru Kenyatta visits the region is their compensation. The 48 families, after meeting with County Commissioner Stephen Kihara, argue that despite being evicted in 2018, they have not yet been compensated.
Since 2018 hadi sasa. Ile kitu sisi tunataka tu pesa. Pesa tu ndio haja yetu. We cannot fight with government. President angeweza kutusaidia tuweze kulipwa na ajue kwamba hatujalipwa.
Tulikuwa nafurahia bypass lakini tumekuwa totally affected. Kwa sababu ukiangalia value ilifanywa 5 years ago. Pesa yenye tungesupposed tulipwe mpaka saa hii haitatusaidia. Wewe hapa hata mwenye bypass imekukuza itapiti serikali ichukue barabara na uhame.
A Nairobi court has been told that the family of Felix Orinda, popularly known as DJ Evolve, and Embakasi, Member of Parliament Babu Owino, are presently in talks to have the attempted murder case against the legislature settled out of court. The prosecution told the court that the two parties have made tremendous progress in the deliberations and that there are just a few remaining documents that they are expecting from the accused. The matter is set for mention on July 28, 2021 for further directions. New taxes on loan fees and commissions are expected to hit out and not just customers but commercial banks. This is according to a new banking sector report by stock brokerage firm AIB Access Africa, which sees negative growth in revenues earned by lenders and higher cost of bank clients. Amendments to the Excise Duty Act carried out in the 2021 Finance Act affected a 20% duty charge to the fees and commissions on loans, a change which took effect on July 1st. Meanwhile, Safaricom has adjusted the pricing of its products and services to reflect recent change to the taxation of telephone and internet data services. The changes, which were activated yesterday, will affect all out-of-bound voice calls, data and SMS, as well as integrated plans. Similarly, the changes will impact the pricing of roaming, international calls and SMS, along with the cost of fiber to the home and fiber to the business plans. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
All right, an accident near Nyambari, Limuru, because of poor visibility, guys. So you need to be extremely careful as you navigate into that general direction. That's heading towards Limuru. Please be very careful. And as though we were counting, there's another accident just after Mutindwa on the incline heading towards Kariobangi. So watch out for that because traffic has slowed because of that. So outer ring between Donholm and Kangundo Road on the interchange, some heavy traffic there. And this is now when it is all showing up. So let's watch out for this. Uhuru Highway, then all the way from the Nyayo Stadium roundabout out through Westlands into the CBD. Heavy traffic this morning. So it's what we ought to watch out for. Mombasa Road then, Imara Daima, that particular area headed outbound towards General Motors. We're also looking at a little bit of traffic in pockets along the southern bypass. So we've looked at that area around Outer Ring. We're seeing it building up a little bit around Joggo Road as well. So let's keep an eye on these places, shall we? Getting into traffic hour proper. Spice FM KE, are you stuck somewhere? Let us know so we can warn others. If you find a good route, let's share that as well. Text on 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's coming up to 6 minutes after 8 o'clock. Very good morning to you wherever you are. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room on Spice FM, Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. We live stream the show as well online, and we're now on KTN Home, where we will be live for the next 1 hour. In the studio with you this morning is Eric Latif, Nduoko, C.T. Muga, and our guest host, John Sibiokumu. Let's start with the day's proverb.
A deaf ear is followed by death. An ear that listens is followed by blessings.
A deaf ear is followed by death.
Mm-hmm.
An ear that listens is followed by blessings.
Yes.
And this is what we were saying, John. It's basically the whole point of all those words is listen.
I agree.
It's just encouraging you to listen. Everything else, yeah, but if you listen, then blessings follow you. If you don't, surely. The end.
Beckons.
Okay.
And it isn't a pleasant end at that.
It isn't. So our guest host today is a man who does very many things. He is a broadcaster, worked at KTN, was a news reader, worked at KTN, anchored a show called The Summit, in which he interviewed. In fact, I think you were the first person to have a one-on-one conversation with the former president, Daniel Arap Moi.
The only person. You must get it right.
The only. Okay. The only person to ever interview former President Daniel Arap Moi one-on-one.
Well, I'm
Eric, insisting on the one-on-one because others could have said,
Exactly, but you must have a measure of relativity. I mean, at the time, it was something that had to happen eventually. It's just a growth. I mean, now it's a given. Our president, our deputy president. It was a big deal in 1997, but it isn't a big deal, and that's the way it should be.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
But at the point it was.
It was.
And who got you the interview? Was it you? Was it the editors at the KTN?
That's a story in itself. You have to wait for my memoirs, Eric.
Oh, come on, John.
So one is coming.
No, I was just being facetious. No, it's a long story. I think the idea of getting a seminal interview like that one took a lot of behind-the-scenes conversations, put it that way, because the understanding was that the head of state shouldn't risk the idea of being questioned by a mere mortal such as myself.
Yeah.
But luckily for the program, pretty much like SpiceFM and your program, is that by the time we'd finished with ourselves, we had such a standing in society that not to come onto the summit was like chickening out. So it was inevitable. Every other presidential candidate had been in editions before. So it just took his minders to persuade him that he wasn't chicken and he could go through the process too.
Right.
And he was, if you watch the footage, a wonderful interviewee.
I did watch the show, actually.
Yes,
I
it's very good.
Everybody was waiting for this particular one. This is Moi going to be interviewed.
Yes.
It was big.
It was big, but it was good to interview. He was good to interview because it's a sort
why
of...
in particular do you say he was good to interview?
Well, the idea, whenever you're... CT, when you're in an interview situation, the idea, it's a bit... That kind of interview is a bit cat and mouse. Because there are different types of interview. This wasn't a profile interview. This is, wasn't how wonderful you are. But for example, it was considered at the time, from a broadcaster's perspective, how can you ask a tough question in a kindly way? So let's go back one. When I talked to Robert Mugabe later on the summit, I began the interview by saying, "You're old enough to be my father." And people say that under your leadership, things are worse for Zimbabwe than they were under the white man. So why don't you bring back the white man? Now, for a man of Mugabe's intelligence, that was, he loved it. Now, you have to think as a broadcaster, how am I going to put this across? I remember there were two questions that I thought I would put to him. And one was, in the bars and restaurants, people are talking about Moi Butu. And in a way, they are comparing you to a dictator. So, Your Excellency, when you go to bed at night, how do you feel when all around you are calling you a dictator? Now, that isn't an accusation. And of course, you see in the cat and mouse thing, he immediately came back and said, me, Mobutu, there's no comparison. Look at the development. And then you sort of speed up a few days and say, well, you're the father of the nation, but a father often hands over to his children, to his sons and his daughters. When, Your Excellency, might it come for you to hand over to somebody else? So, I mean, there's a certain delight in getting the questions across and surviving the experience without being accused of treason.
In addition to being a journalist, you also are a thespian. You are a teacher. You've taught for many years. Just tell us about that.
Eric, these are difficult questions. You're still not waiting for my memoirs. You're not patient.
No, not yet. I just want tidbits of what you expect in the memoir.
It's very simple. People go and have an education and end up with a profession. I had an education that had me ending up as a teacher of French in high school. And I taught in high schools as a teacher, mwalimu, a moniker that is attached to me, for over 25 years. But then, again, historically, I happen to have had a childhood that started off in 1960s London, because my father went there to study, and that gave me a sort of heads up in terms of my proximity to and facility with the English language. So that was the sideshow that always ran against my professionalism. When I was a very little child at school, I presented at an assembly, and in those days, in the 1960s, we had something called the Kenya Schools Broadcasting Division of the KBC, and the Kenya Schools Broadcasting Division taught people in classrooms long before the internet. They taught people in school by radio. So the person who came as guest speaker for our speech day picked me up to present I presented a poem, and he said, "Oh, this guy would be ideal for the teaching of English on the school's broadcasting." So my broadcasting career historically began when I was about 11 or 12, and this is 55 years later, so a long time.
And your life in the theatre, which will lead us now to the conversation about the books that you've written, the plays that you've written, and the conversations that you've wanted to start with your plays.
Right.
What led you to theatre?
Well, you know, when you're being very diplomatic, the first thing that I must do is to thank the people on your show for actually giving a focus to a creative, to the arts. Because I think there is, in my own life, the arts are, to me, sacred. And I would say that giving voice to people like me and others like me, poets, novelists, is just as important as putting on people who are ambassadors, talking about BBI, because I would have the audacity to say that the creative artist is the engine of a society, is the one that's running it. So thank you for bringing me on the show. As a playwright, I started being an actor at school, and I went to a school which placed a great deal of cheo on the arts and acting, lots of drama competitions and everything. And so lots of drama in high school. Then when the memoirs come out, we had the Phoenix Players, run by the late James Falkland, lots of plays there. The Phoenix Players is the one that sort of spawned Lupita Nyong'o. She started off there as Juliet, but it's now shut down. And having acted in lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of plays and lots and lots and lots and lots of lead roles, the challenge was given to me to write some myself, because we don't have such a canon of plays. Every Kenyan of a certain age would have read Ngugi wa Thiong'o, The Trial of Dedan Kimathi, Ngai Kadenda, I Will Marry When I Want. Every Kenyan would have heard of the late Francis Mbuga, a personal friend of mine, and a big brother type who did Betrayal in the City. So generations and generations have been doing Betrayal in the City. But if you look, Eric, and do CT, those plays were written in 1975. So for the Festac Festival, the Nigerian festival that had the second All Africa. So to have a gap where there are no sort of names popping out of this country, let alone of this region, it's been possible through an inspired publisher for somebody to publish all 6 of the plays that I wrote during a period that lasted from 2004 to 2014 and encapsulate them in one volume, which again is something of a first. Normally our playwrights, David Mulwa, Mbuga, all these people are to be read in little Aminata, Redemption. So again, it's a bit like the Moi thing. All these things tie up. It's not a big deal that I'm doing it, but it's the way to go, and at last it has happened. So there'll be mine, next year there'll be somebody else's, and such is life.
Right. I think there are a lot of in the plays that you have written, it's in as much as they're there for pleasure. I believe that there are messages within for Kenyan society, for individuals. What are some of the themes that run through that could point to who Kenyans are and who they ought to be?
A good question, and one I could give a half-hour lecture on this one, but I wish to qualify. If you're into language and all that kind of thing, the precision is key. I don't think that there are messages, but that there are stories that bear messages. So the first thing that any writer has to do, whether it's how the leopard got its spots or how the hyena conquered the elephant. Sorry, unfortunate example. I'm not thinking straight, but whatever animal got its spots. The idea is to tell a story, and then you ask the little kid at the end of the day, what did this story mean?
Yeah.
So let me give you an example, and you're all of great intellect, you'll work it out. The story in the first of my plays had people playing against racial type. So if you were an English person, you would be played by an African, and if you were an Indian person, you might be played by an English person, and mixed as an exam where kids are told to take on a role so that you can pass your French exams. So this is a multiracial cast, and central to that is Mzee. And Mzee was born around about the time of my own father in the 1930s, sort of Mwai Kibaki thing. And it's obviously that he's dying, and he's staying, as we do, with his relation, his wife, his son and his son's wife. But significantly, we don't see the husband. He's not there because he's out. And every single male in the play, when all these families, Asian, European, African, there's the idea of the absentee male. So is there a message in that? Maybe there is. But Mzee, the central character, who is now being played by Mzungu in the thing. So if you've always said, South Asians, Indians are horrible people, the person who's saying that is an Indian. You know what I'm saying? So you're looking at your own stereotypes. And therefore, again, the movement forward, in the days of Ngugi and Mbuga, all their plays were set in fictional African countries. It was in Kafira, Chinua Achebe's, in some whatever it was. But now, look at the great thing. Not only are we daring to suggest that people might be dictators, but you can actually have Mzee remembering about the torture chambers in Nyayo. And asking, who killed J.M. Kariuki? Who killed Tom Mboya? Now, if I'd attempted to do that in 1975, the stakes would have been dire. So the other thing that Kenyans ought to celebrate, there are lots of things that we ought to celebrate as a society, is that maybe nasty things happen, and nasty things happen everywhere, but we've made a prodigious leap in allowing the artists to express themselves without fear of detention, without fear of assassination, without fear of living in exile. And long may it continue. Here am I chatting to you.
So it's important for us to appreciate where we've come from and where we're going as a country. It's also important for us to look at our challenges, the challenges that we are facing today as a country.
Right.
It's been said many times that one of the key challenges that we have as a country is this thing called tribalism.
Yes.
Is it a challenge?
for me, as it's very individual. For me, it is the single most pernicious and destructive element of our society.
How so?
I think because tribalism is used to make otherwise intelligent people make silly options. So tribalism is used so that if CT were to contemplate becoming president, I think for me the thing is, where does he come from? We're playing our numbers little game, and we've got to do our little. These intelligent people, when we're all sitting together having a drink, we don't sit there for half an hour analyzing our ethnic constructs. But come 2022, there is already a riveting of people's cleavages, so-and-so doing this. With the more scary bit is that if you represent enough of a threat, then I'm going to arm you with machetes, cigarettes, petrol, and you're going to cause mayhem and kill people. As we saw in 2007 and 1992, everything that has ripped the Kenyan society apart is owed to ethnicity and tribalism. Then, as a cousin, as a little cousin of that ethnicity, is that if I'm your man or woman, then I have to have the wherewithal financially to wield the political and social power. So the small cousin of ethnicity then becomes corruption.
But
because
John, is it something that folks carry about from your perspective? Is it something that people, Kenyans, because I will speak at this point as someone from the outside looking in.
Right, but you're Kenyan by choice. What has happened? I heard that it's false.
Let's talk about that later.
Okay.
But now the thing is it something that Kenyans carry about with them all the time, or is it something that is whipped out that can be used?
The latter, whipped out. That's why I said it's pernicious, because remember my sort of Mickey Mouse definition, it's something that makes intelligent people behave foolishly and make irrational decisions. Tribalism is the fruit where we couldn't envisage how many, the smallest group, the El Molo, we could never, ever, ever, ever envisage an El Molo president
of this country.
Out of it. Yeah, no matter if we're talking earlier about Hillary Ngueno, even if he'd gone to Harvard and came back with a degree in nuclear physics, he wouldn't crack it. And the mere fact that again, it's not a condemnation. I think we've got to we shouldn't self-flagellate every morning and say, Africa's had a lot to learn in terms of making these leaps and adopting these ways of thought. So did I, sort of by association of ideas, did I ever imagine that Mandela would walk free out of Robben Island and greet people? I did not. Did I ever imagine that Barack Obama would take the oath of office as the whatever? I didn't, but it happened. It brought tears to my eyes, but it happened. And he wasn't an ideal president. So there's a movement forward. It's very easy for the artist, like myself, to be seen as the person who is saying everything stinks, we've got to go back, nothing works. No, you're just saying that good old Shakespearean analogy of holding a mirror up to society and saying, what do you see? And maybe sometimes when CT looks at himself in the mirror, he says, oh my gosh, where are my teenage good looks? We've lost them. But it's worth him going in and investing in a good sort of skin cream. And that's the analogy. The artist, the creative, urges you to go and buy the skin cream.
So as a society, sorry, City. Go ahead.
He's thinking about the skin cream.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
you're stuck on that.
Yes.
As a society, then, John, we speak and we call ourselves Kenyans, and then when it comes to politics, we sort of say, okay, Kenyan, but first of all, I am El Molo, I'm Luo, I'm Kikuyu, I'm Kisi, and then I'm Kenyan. Outside of politics, we are Kenyan. when we are watching our athletes, they're going to Japan, we will be watching them as Kenyans. Their name will not matter. We'll be watching them as Kenyans. When we feel that there's an external threat, we all look at that external threat as Kenyans. So where do we draw that line? Who's a Kenyan and who's not a Kenyan? What makes us Kenyan and what makes us Kikuyu?
Well, again, one of the things that I'm not is God. So I'm not going to give a sort of all-embracing definition. But Eric, I'll tell you what my thoughts are. I think it is the inclination of all of us, right from the school playground, to make distinctions. I'm sure, Ndu, you remember as a little girl, you probably ganged up with other little girls to sort out the girl who was talking to the boys more. It's the idea of separation, of wanting to be distinct, is, I think, inherent to the sort of animalistic DNA in our nature. So you're saying, what is it that makes Kenyans come together to sort of cheer on Eliud Kipchoge and then be, burning each other in cathedrals after an election? I think that job has to do with education, because there is a great mass grouping of our society that hasn't interacted, that hasn't traveled to each other to see how we live and eat in our various places. So the ethnic fervor is being whipped up in pockets. You see, if you go to my home village and sort of suggested that there's a fellow called C.T. Muga who wants to come in and lead, there's a hostility towards that. But that's because I've never seen a C.T. Muga in my village.
Because you don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
So I think, the teacher in me all those years, I think that education, and I'm sure Mandela's got a quote for that as well, the be-all and end-all is making people aware. I'm still returning to this initial image. If you think about it, it doesn't make sense to be tribal. It doesn't make sense. I can't look at Ndu and of the essence say she's Nigerian by birth and Kenyan by choice. You have to be told. What is the other analogy that, teachers, you're always with the teacher, so it's always you do with images. Have you ever thought of this thing? Whenever we go to the village, my relations, my aunties, they never consciously talk about their age. In the conversation, they don't meet and say, "Oh my gosh, Celestine, you look young today." But then they just go off to the shamba and dig, and if they're women, they're women, and if they're male, they're male, and they age naturally. But if you have a society where everybody is saying, "Oh, how old are you?" and then you say, "Well, I'm such and such a..." "Oh, but do you look so young for your age? I'd have thought you were 17. And there are magazines churning out this stuff. The awareness of the fact. Long before, under my dictatorship, I would make... sorry, I'm giving things away. Under my dictatorship, there is something to be said about having a society like the Singhs or something, where every woman is called Kaur and every man is called Singh. So part of the reason is that I'm trying to read something into Muga. I'm trying to read something into Latif. And I haven't really read enough into Latif. I'm trying to think, where the hell does it... where does this guy come from? So, but just looking at him, he could be Ghanaian, he could be Nigerian, he could be anything. And he could be African American, straight off the streets of New York. So it's the labeling, and we do a lot to label. So again, under my dictatorship, no ID cards, no asking people. And you can see that in this conversation, I'm trying really, really hard not to make reference to my own origins.
Yes.
You could play that. And then everybody from where I come from would say, rah, 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 yeah. There's our man. But there's a bit of a mystery to Sibi Okumu, which I've encountered positively and negatively. But I just wish I was called, since we're all Africans, I wish I was called John African, and you were Jim African, and you were Nancy African.
And that's all.
And that's all.
Let's take a break at this
But
point.
we don't need to know where we come from, the sub-district, the location, the chief. No.
Having a conversation with our guest host today, John Sibiokumu. John African. Who's a Kenyan? Who qualifies to be a Kenyan? That's a conversation we're having. Time for us to take a break. 28 minutes to 9 o'clock. We are on KTN Home, Spice FM, and online. We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
Do your callers frequently ask you what stories made the news headlines? Introducing the Call Bulletin, courtesy of Skiza. You can now keep your callers informed and up to date with the latest news updates from KTN News, courtesy of Skiza. Dial *811 *795 hash to subscribe today. Set the tone with Skiza.
Spice FM.
It's getting hot in here.
Oh, everybody steals. It's better a thief who brings something small back. And I say to myself, there's no better thief. A thief is a thief, period.
All those bribes, how much they are getting per year, how much inconvenience they are causing. As much as you call it a small case, it's worth it to be convicted.
The truth is, we are a tribal nation. Because if we were not tribal, and I want to go back to this, you cannot continue walking around with a mug which is clean outside and it's rotten inside.
We have become a Fuliza country. We have mortgaged our country because of debt.
You've got one chef working and the assistant chef wakati anatakana koroge unga nini hayuko.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
It's cloudy in Nairobi at 15, highs of 19 and lows of 14. Rain showers at 13 in Nyeri, highs of 19 today. 23 will be the high in a rainy Nakuru at 15. It's also raining in Eldoret at 15, highs of 21 and lows of 12. 27 will be the high in Kisumu today. It's mostly cloudy now at 21. 21 is that lucky number in Kakamega as well, and mostly cloudy, highs of 25 and lows of 15. 28 will be the high in Mombasa. It's raining at 25. It's raining now in Malindi as well at 26. With highs of 28, it'll come down to lows of 24. Out of Kenya into Kampala, it's partly sunny at 21. Highs of 26 and lows of 18. We'll see highs of 29 in Dar es Salaam. It's mostly cloudy at 25. It's 9 degrees and sunny in Johannesburg. With highs of 16, it'll come down to lows of 7. It's raining in Lagos at 24. With highs of 30, lows of 24. Sunny conditions at 19 in Kinshasa. With highs of 30. We'll see lows of 21.
Spice up your life.
All right, so we're looking at traffic, certain parts of Nairobi today. Okay, let's look out for that Limuru winter because visibility is extremely poor. Clouds are very low and the fog also is quite thick. So be careful. Fog lights up, absolutely necessary this morning. Gong Road between the junction and the southern bypass is being described as a death trap, rather. So you want to be very careful. In terms of speed, slow it down a little bit, guys, and be extremely careful. Kimende, we're also looking at serious fog today, very, very low. So again, use your lights. It's absolutely necessary. Uhuru Highway, then Westlands through into the city, out towards Mombasa Road. That whole area, we will see extended traffic for some time. So let's watch out for that. The 10th of July, be very aware, especially right now for folks in Mombasa. Makupa Causeway, it's going to be closed. Watch out for that. SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Text on 40127 through the day.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice
It's
FM.
4 minutes to 9. The conversation continues in the Situation Room with Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko, and our guest hosts today, John Sibiukumu, broadcaster, teacher, thespian, playwright, thinker, Kenyan, all those combined. We're talking about being a Kenyan. Who qualifies to be a Kenyan? And as we were going into this break, I actually remembered, one of those Muungano songs, Muungano choir songs. One of them was saying, Mimi kabila gani, kabila langu mimi, kabila la Kenya. They're just saying, whatever, you are Kenyan. It's not about your ethnicity, it's you are Kenyan. And that's what we're asking ourselves. So, who qualifies to be Kenyan? City, I'm sure you have 17 questions for John Sibiukumu. We'll start with number 1, A.
I'm not even thinking of the question. I had thought of the question before we went on to the break. But I'm thinking of what it is that influences or educates my mind with relation to how I identify myself. What are the contributors to this self-identification? Is it my heritage, as in beginning with my parents? Is it my education? Is it my socialization? What is it? And as I was thinking about it, the country of Tanzania came to mind. Because in Tanzania, people call themselves Tanzanians. It's how they think. Whereas in Kenya, if you ask me who I am, I will tell you I'm Kenyan, yes. But my thinking is, when you ask me who I am, I don't think of Kenya first. I think of it as an acceptable response. But I think of myself in terms of my ethnicity, where I come from. And part of the reason is because as you grow up in this country, one of the things that is required of you, and it's even in our identification cards or identification documents, where you come from is of great importance. It's very, very important. So my mind is informed about my self of identification beginning with my ethnicity. But I personally do not think that in and of itself is negative. Personally, it isn't negative. It's like talking about colors and saying that you'd like the acceptable color to be green, and then every other color is questionable. No. The idea, the whole idea of color is important because of the diversity that it presents. But what is it that makes this simple process of identification negative? If you look at the country of Tanzania that came to my mind, and I look at the concept of ujamaa, which was introduced by the founding president, Julius Nyeri, and the people around him, because it isn't, we talk of one person, but it's always a group of people thinking about it. And you realize that because of the way they structured their society, or the way they brought about the structure of the society, it wasn't there before they brought it. People identified themselves as members of communities, which, as I said, is not negative. Even now, with the years that have gone by, and as was pointed out by you, Eric, and you, John, Tanzania has more ethnic communities than we have in Kenya, but you never hear of them. But when we talk about Kenya, the thing that we talk about most is our ethnicity. So what is it that has brought us to the point where ethnicity is the focal point of our discussions when you talk about being Kenyan? You're Kenyan, yes, but your ethnicity is actually at the heart. Even when you don't talk about it, it's behind every conversation you have when you talk about being Kenyan.
Like this one, Kenyan of Asian origin.
Yes.
Well, CT, there are several things that are worth commenting upon. One of them is that the question of age, in the sense that if you look at my children as the product of an inter-ethnic union, there are several things that they're not doing that playing the game. And that is, apart from speaking Kiswahili, which they learnt at school, patchily, and English well, they do not speak my mother tongue, neither do they speak their mother's. I'm trying to say by this little anecdote is that...
So they don't have a mother tongue?
No, in as much as no, because we don't speak it at home. But they're not... There's another group of youngsters out there who are not growing up with all this baggage. they're not saying, I come from so-and-so east. So aren't they the Kenyans we want? Aren't they the Africans we want? They will have a name. They'll going for Christmas. I'm sure, CT, you take your kids Christmas, Easter, you take them somewhere. But I don't think that they share your rabid sort of attachment to your ethnic group. The other thing that you must do where it's negative is that we must beware of this idea that there is unity in diversity. It's a nice slogan. It's a very nice slogan to have. But we also have to think about the idea of opportunity. If you get into a situation where there is diversity, but we're in this room and three of us can have a conversation which totally excludes and do. We greet each other every day. There's a whole thing going on, which is we want to include. Either we're going to adopt this idea of the nation state and go for it, and don't forget that the global village is also obviating the nation state. So are we going back to the way where I would sort of say, I am so-and-so, I am the great-grandchild of so-and-so, praise myself, I come from such and such a clan, you are not what the same clan do, so there could be a thing between us. That kind of classification has gone, because I could well, as has been seen in creative works, I could meet my niece at a disco and start propositioning her. The world has changed. The world has changed. But the idea of equal opportunity in a society, when opportunity is pegged to ethnicity, then surely ethnicity must be a bad thing. Nobody's telling you to stop being what you are. But if it's at the expense of me also progressing when I have like attributes, like qualifications, and perhaps better, then it's something against which a society must legislate.
But then,
in order to have change, you've got to do things like call everybody a Tanzanian or outlaw speaking ethnic tongues in the office place. It's not colonial, it's not anything. It's either we're going to be united or we're going to be divided.
So in order to stop the kind of conflict that we see that comes out as a result of some of these, then the best thing to do, or I'm asking, is it the best thing to do to legislate so that you're not suggesting, but that you're kind of forcing people to behave in a certain manner and then adopt a certain attitude?
I think yes. Again, there's history. There's history. This is not going to be sort of, if you were both Francophone, if you learnt about the great Napoleon, what did he do? The great tribe, go back to the Roman Empire, when they were sort of going from one end, outer Mongolia, all the way to the UK. This centralized thing, Latin, whatever you were, that's what you did.
Yep.
And in order to talk to the consul, you had to sort of come out with a few Latin phrases. Napoleon took the Breton and the whatever and the Languedoc and all these tribes and standardized the French language to be what it is today. Even the Queen's English, if you go back to the knocking together of heads, okay, they're Welshmen, they're Scotsmen, and even now we hear
please bring in the Irish.
And the Irish.
Thank you.
They someone wish to secede, but for the greater glory of Great Britain, the heads have been knocked together to adopt the English language. So the idea of legislation, the idea, I think, as Kenyans, we would do well as a society to legislate more things. We could do a Lee Kuan Yew and say, don't litter the streets. We could say, don't drop chewing gum. Nairobi would be a cleaner place. As long as there are lots of people, good people. We're not on a desert island. It's not Robinson Crusoe. There are 47 million of us. 47 million people cannot all be walking about doing whatever they wish to do as individuals. There are certain things which, kiddie terms are good, which it must be bad to do.
Yes.
It's bad. We're not going to do that.
As I hear you, John, and I get what you're saying, in terms of what our ethnicity is doing to the national fabric and psyche of saying we are Kenyan, and then saying let's promote this one thing and say we are all Kenyan and sort of try and minimize the importance of our tribes, that could be counterproductive, though.
In what way?
In terms of developing our societies and our histories and our cultures and our roots. As somebody who loves language,
yes,
you've been teaching a foreign language.
Yes,
you're speaking a foreign language.
Yes,
but then you're saying that, you know what, my children will not know my local language, my mother's language. Aren't we killing our own languages in favor of this big one foreign language?
A very
and before you answer that,
yes.
There was
You're going to
also
ask me
this
2 questions in one. I was just going to go back on that one. I'm ready for that one.
I'm basically just building up on this.
Mhm.
There was another push again to say children, when they go to ECD, they should all be taught only in English or Swahili. Previously, ECD, you start by learning in your mother tongue. If you're somewhere, let's say in Tana River, and the local people there speak Pokomo, you started speaking your mother tongue, Pokomo. So you go to school and you're taught in Pokomo, and then you're taught to now bring in Pokomo into English. Then there was a push now to say, let's not do that because we're promoting tribalism and ethnicity. Is that not counterproductive?
It's not counterproductive. You must, if you're going to see something through the Pokomo, in the Kenya that we have today, let us assume that there is a region of Kenya in which children are being taught in Taita. And you, Eric, go to work there, and you're not Taita. So surely, for your children, Taita is not a mother tongue.
Yep.
So you can't, what's the word they use? You can't spread that notion and make it stick. What I'm saying is that you must be aware. It's very, very seductive when you tell people that everything that exists has to be sustained. But if you listen to all these sort of Richard Attenborough's, David Attenborough's, Richard Leakey's, all these people, they will tell you that the story of our existence is about extinction
and change.
And change.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not sort of saying, oh my gosh, what's happened to Prectorodilus? What's happened to Brontosaurus? They were really nice dinosaurs. They have disappeared. So the end justifies the means. What I would say is that if, as a parent or as parents, we can create an environment in which our offspring can retain these facets of our culture, they will be sustained within. So, for example, if it's getting rarer and rarer, but I relish the idea of meeting people who speak my quote-unquote mother tongue. So when we meet, but then if they come into my household and we start gassing away, it's to the exclusion of my wife. And ditto when her relations come and they adopt their language, I feel excluded. But is this idea that just to be able to have a set of sounds, languages are a set of sounds that make sense to people at a certain time. Does the African American really wanting to go back and talk to the Yoruba that took him off from across the Atlantic? Does the Polish American, does the Italian American, does the Jewish American really, really lament the death of Yiddish in American society? No. They will say, I'm a Polish Jew, I'm a Polish Jew, I'm an American Jew, but I think they speak to each other in American English.
That's true, but I think they romanticize the idea of going back home.
Well,
you've seen incidences where somebody who is a black American lands in Africa and kisses the ground and says, you know what, these are my roots. There's a thing about identity and your roots and where you come from.
Right. No, sorry. When you decide that a polity, a set of boundaries, is we are here, partly being Kenyan means that we fall under Kenyan jurisdiction. Certain things happen in this country that don't happen elsewhere. Maybe part of being Kenyan is to know that I can travel always with a 200 bob note on the dashboard and know that if a cop pulls me aside for any infringement, the exchange of the 200 bob and I'm off. That's also part of being Kenyan. Because I might try to do that in New York City or Singapore, or I might try to give an inducement to the elevator man and it won't go down. So why doesn't it go down in these other societies? Because it's stepped on. And when you escalate that whole notion, it goes to the notion of people making offenses as a society and getting away scot-free. The whole notion of impunity. You can do what you like. So as long as we stay that way, and I think Museveni has given us a little viral clip that way, we will be forever the God-forsaken primitives. And other people will impose on us. So in other words, the consequences of our conduct, actions have consequences. We dream of the African Renaissance. We dream of the Africa we want. We dream of Pan-Africanism. If we dream of Pan-Africanism, then let's go for Swahili, Hausa, Arab, Wolof, and say every kid in Nairobi ought to be learning Wolof. Other things will go by the wayside. But the sentiment is being attached to what is by its very nature is never going to survive.
But John, the thing that underpins all these things, the thread that ties them together, is benefit. You see, my being ethnic, if it presents no benefit whatsoever to me, I do not need someone to tell me to abandon it. I will quietly abandon it. Anything that we look at, any grouping, even if you leave tribalism aside, any grouping that human beings tend to move or gravitate towards, there has to be benefit.
But you're arguing my corner, CT. Are you aware that you're arguing my corner? You're saying that who benefits if it benefits a certain grouping, but we want to stop those who feel that it is entitlement to benefit.
You see, my argument...
To feel entitled, I am therefore, we... That is the idea of dynasties and the whole sort of hustler versus whatever dialogue that we're living through now.
It's cronyism, really. I mean, there are many names, many facets of the same discussion that bear certain titles, certain names, certain labelings when explaining the same thing. But it doesn't detract from the basic understanding. You see, talk numbers, talk identity, talk benefit. All you're saying is, at the end of the day, we will not gravitate towards something that does not offer any benefit to us. And I'm saying that even as you talk about change, and I'm agreeing with you, you talk about change. If the change appears to be beneficial, yes, then I will gravitate towards it. If it doesn't, then I won't. Now, the reason why...
So you're saying that Kenyans shouldn't see the benefit in gravitating towards an abandonment of ethnicity?
No.
They won't get it?
No.
That's why I'm saying I agree with you. You're arguing my corner.
No.
We should get rid of the benefits as a nation so that people perceive that there's expanded benefit for all. We're not getting rid of the notion of benefit, CT. We're just spreading the
Are you
jam.
aware that you're hijacking my argument and you're propelling it in
and pulling it to your
in
corner,
a direction that
corner.
suits you?
Yeah, that's what I thought I came here to do.
Precisely. And I haven't actually even completed what I wanted to say. But the thing that you've done well is hijack what I'm saying, and you've presented your case well. But let me add a little bit to what you're saying. You see, nothing that we do as mankind, in my view, is done without this small notion. And benefit isn't benefit until it is balanced by the absence of it or something negative. Now, if you look at what we call Western-styled progress, as in creating a middle class, having ourselves surrounded by all manner of consumer isms, consumer things and what have you. The whole notion of modernization seems to revolve around some of these ideas and the manifestations of it. Now, modernization in and of itself really not just chips at, but it erodes the very notion of tribalism to a very, very large extent. One, through your education, through your associations, etc., etc. But why did I focus on benefit? Because it is the one thing, when it is slanted in a certain direction for historical reasons or otherwise, it is the one thing that promotes tribalism more than anything else. Because one, people feel it offers you security, even if it doesn't. People feel it offers you opportunities for economic advancement. People feel it offers you the very thing that would make your life better, even if it doesn't. So the notion for this to be disabused and for it to get to a point where you see it naked, I was about to say butt naked, for what it actually is, then the understanding, as you say correctly, of this idea of being Kenyan, meaning it has to resonate. But the only way it resonates is if you can see the benefit of not being tribal. And yet, we brought about the notion of counties with this in mind, cascading benefits to the very grassroots. And yet, by so doing, we've actually gone and encouraged this very notion of tribalism again, not in its negative sense, because when you talk about counties, we have the very concept is within the boundaries and within communities of ethnicity.
It's communities. That's, communities come from ethnicity. I'm yet to be convinced by what you're saying, John, that, we need to start downgrading our ethnicity and we need to start promoting one universal, homogeneous ethnic grouping and say this is who we are. I don't get it, but I think you'll continue with the conversation. Let's hear even from our listeners as well as our audience. 0719-012-600 or SpiceFM KE, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. What defines a Kenyan? Who qualifies to be a Kenyan? What is it that makes us Kenyan and who we are? Time for us to say goodbye to our audience on KTN Home who've been with us since the top of the hour. This conversation continues on SpiceFM. Tune in to SpiceFM wherever you are. If you're in Nairobi, it's 94.4, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, and Malindi, it's 97.7.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.
So it's just about a minute and a half to the top of the hour. The conversation continues into the next hour. This 1 minute, respond to CT's long-winded argument.
I would respond by another sort of teacherly didactic analogy, because Kenya has people in the United States wanting to go across to get green cards and take up citizenship. I think we've all got at least one relation who does that. We have to factor in that being Kenyan doesn't mean necessarily being black and tribal. There are white Kenyans, brown Kenyans, yellow Kenyans. Yeah. What about them? And maybe we'll discuss them in the next 2 hours.
Indeed we will, in the next hour. 0719-012-600. Let's hear what you think about this as well. Who qualifies to be a Kenyan? How do we define ourselves as Kenyan? What is it that we need to do so that we can all feel, when you're asked, who are you? Say, I'm Kenyan. And you don't even see that question to be somebody asking, trying to dig deep into your ethnicity. Someone asks you, City Dani Muga. Muga.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Latif, na hiyo ni ya wapi? Good morning. It's now 9 a.m.
Spice up your life.
This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto. Some religious leaders are asking the government to suspend the constitution amendment process through the BBI until after the 2022 general elections. The National Council on Churches says that Kenyans are now focused on the upcoming general election and that BBI may be troubling them. Meanwhile, ODM leader Raila Odinga has maintained that he is stunned that a referendum can be conducted despite the forthcoming general elections fast approaching. Speaking in an interview with Citizen Radio, Raila expressed hope that the Court of Appeal would allow the exercise to continue when it makes its ruling next month. The no-confidence motion against Interior CS Fred Matiang'i is gaining momentum in the National Assembly after legislators pushing the agenda have said they intend to collect enough signatures from fellow MPs before submitting the motion to Parliament. Nyali MP Mohammed Ali confirmed that MPs Babu Owino and George Theuri have initiated the process after the CS continuously snubbed committee meetings seeking answers to various national issues. And Kenya Police Service has rubbished the video showing a traffic officer being robbed of his phone, insisting that the video was edited. Via Twitter, police have urged Kenyans to ignore the video, further claiming that this is meant to tarnish the reputation of the police service. A camera recorded an incident in which one of the two passengers on a motorcycle stole an officer's phone while directing traffic, leaving the officer stunned. A kidnapping suspect detained in Mtwapa Police Station, Kilifi County, is expected to be arraigned today in Shanzu Magistrates Court. Joseph Wamalwa was arrested in Bamburi for allegedly abducting young women in various parts of the coast region and sexually abusing them. Mtwapa Police Commander Mohamed Wako said Wamalwa has been on the wanted list and that they had to use a female police officer who pretended to want to meet him. And consumers in Nairobi, Kirinyaga and Kajiado counties are concerned about the safety of food they are consuming. According to Consumer Grassroots Association study, county governments in the said counties are not doing enough to assure Kenyans of their safety. The report adds that the uncertainty among the residents is due to lack of information.
Use and misuse of pesticides, and then we have sanitation, lack of proper sanitation in the markets, of which that is something that is very evident from wherever we're actually buying food from. And then there was an issue of the transportation and then the handling bit, which was the last or the minimal concern, because you get that after we buy the food to go and prepare, we have the control of ensuring safety ourselves.
Basically, a larger number don't really know that what they're consuming is safe, because what they find in the market is what they consume.
This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Wow, when we should be getting out of traffic hour, it seems like this is when it has all begun. The southern bypass from Langata at the interchange there is an absolute mess today. There's been a fatal accident on the Outer Ring Caltex Expressway this morning. Terrible accident between a lorry and a motorcycle, and that has turned fatal, and that is causing quite some traffic right now, waiting for emergency services to sort that out. So headed in that direction, please be very, very careful. We're also looking at parts of the city, or rather parts of the country, where visibility is extremely low today. Kimende, Limuru, those areas, please use your fog lights. It is very, very important. So of parking lots and fatal accidents this morning, Outer Ring coming from Donholm, it is very bad. Jogo Road just before the Burma today also very, very tight. That's what we're looking at right now. Let's keep an eye on things. If you find an alternate route, let us know. Otherwise, you're going to have to dab it all with a bit of patience. SpiceFM KE, that's how you can get in touch with us on Twitter. Text on 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your
Kenya's
day.
biggest conversation gets into the fourth hour. We want you to participate in this conversation this hour by calling in 0719-012-600 or SpiceFM KE, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Our guest host today, John Sibiokumu. CT, today's proverb.
A deaf ear is followed by death. An ear that listens is followed by blessings.
A deaf ear is followed by death. An ear that listens is followed by blessing. You hear that, John?
Yeah, I just wish CT would listen to me.
I am listening to you. That is why on certain salient points I am differing with you, because I have actually listened to you.
Okay.
That's a
You'll
blessing.
live long.
I'll be blessed mightily.
So, John, just to crystallize your argument this morning, you've talked about, and the conversation is still happening even on social media. Tribalism is the single most destructive element of our society, you said. It is used to make otherwise intelligent people make silly decisions. Then you went ahead and gave us your own example and said, in my own home, we encourage our children to speak other languages, English, French, and others, and Swahili. They've learnt it in school. These are national and international languages. You and your wife come from different ethnic backgrounds, so you don't speak your own languages to your children at home. And saying also now, when it comes to public places, people should stop speaking their mother tongue in public because it's exclusionist. We're here, we're speaking our mother tongue, and Ndu Okod is of a different ethnicity. So she basically is left out, and then we keep switching in and out.
Eric, the school teacher me is going to come out again. For those of us who live in Nairobi, there was a time when people could smoke everywhere. And then somebody, again, the key word legislation, said smoking was banned in certain areas. So if those who wish to smoke, they congregate at every lunchtime at Jivanji Gardens, there to indulge their desire to have nicotine. And in their case, it's bad. It's the same. Speaking a language is good. Learning to speak a language is good. But making a public display of it is what I would legislate against. And remember, Eric, that I'm just saying, if you want things to change, you have to legislate. Again, look, we're talking about what it is to be Kenyan. We now have our border phenomenon. That is the idea of a motorbike that can wheel in. So you're driving quite merrily, you look into the rear view mirror, and then you see a motorbike with 3 people, 4 people, all without helmets, coming in, weaving in, so the better to get to the... But how many times...
Including the rider himself.
Yes, how many times have you you're just talking about a fatal accident, how many times have you really thought, my gosh, another inch? Because you're making your decisions thinking that won't happen. So I think you need who's that man? You need a Lee Kuan Yew type approach to society. We in this country need a Lee Kuan Yew.
As dramatic as that, because what we're looking at with him is that, you throw a piece of gum in the street and it was not a matter of a beg, it was you're whipped, literally.
Is Singapore a bad place to live? I've got friends working there now.
But this is what
I've
saying.
I've got a banker friend who works in Singapore.
Yeah.
His kids have been there for a year since they translocated with dad, and they were living here in a part of Nairobi. They told grandpa, we don't want to come back.
But
to live here.
But if you speak...
This is the new generation. These are kids younger than yours, CT, whom I know.
But you see, this is the thing.
They don't want to come back.
People have then acclimatized to a system of order that you never thought would have been possible before.
Yes.
Now, this action that would have been taken against people probably served as a deterrent to anybody else who wanted to behave in that manner. And so it stopped anybody from doing that. Right. And then what you have is a society that abides in order.
Exactly. Yes. But that's just part of the story.
Sure. However, if you're looking...
You're spot on.
If you're looking at...
And remember that Lee Kuan Yew brought Chinese, Singaporeans, what were they? Hindus, there were 3, and the local, kind of local guys. Yeah. And look at the sort of things. Legislation, we just got to keep our key word. Legislation. He said we're building these flats, and we're building this block of flats here. They will not just be for the Shahs or the Patels, because they built them, but when the flats are built, a Shah has to live to a Patel and a Kamau and a Vinya. 25 years later, things change.
Yes, but why did it work so well? People saw the benefits.
Were they seeing the benefit at the point?
No, they were not. They could not see it, because essentially when you legislate, what you're asking people to do is to change from what they're accustomed to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So half the time we're not fighting about future benefits. You don't understand. We're fighting change.
Yeah.
Okay. But a government like that, the government that we speak of, the one thing that they did, the so-called Mwananchi, to the smallest common denominator, could see the benefits of the decision that this government was making on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. There's another thing that was also happening. The government was responding to a problem.
Yes.
There's a problem here, the government is responding to it. In our own case, our local laws have responded to the problem of littering. And that's why there's legislation, whether it's bylaws or national legislation, against littering and just dumping of garbage. Our own government responded to the issue of smoking and exposing non-smokers to the harmful effects of smoking unwillingly. And there's a Tobacco Control Act, which bans smoking in public, like you've just reminded us, John. Now, you are saying, let's outlaw speaking ethnic mother tongue languages in public and only
Eric,
speak...
I'm going to complete your equation. It was such a lovely equation. Our local this have done this, our local things have done that. The last formulation should have been, but our local leaders consciously encourage tribalism.
Okay.
So everybody else is saying ban, 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 but our local leaders are consciously stoking the flames of ethnicity to garner votes, I guess. That's what politicians want.
Yes.
So there's one thing, yeah.
So what you're advocating is us outlawing speaking mother tongue and ethnic languages in public. Because our law recognizes English and Swahili as the national languages. Language of instruction, the official language. The official language is the language of instruction in school. It's the language.
Outlawing is such a... I'm saying, don't shoot the messenger. I'm saying, Eric, it doesn't really make sense for a head of state to go onto a local station and conduct a whole interview in a mother tongue. And then in the 9 o'clock news, you have that language translated on for the benefit of the masses. It's giving a bad example. Now that's something that shouldn't happen, and we agreed in the Jomo Kenyatta era. We had the idea of we're all meant to speak frankly on this show of yours. So let me give you a few memories. He arrived, and there were always the Kikuyu tribal dancers. Always the Kikuyu tribal dancers. Now that Moi didn't quite play that game with as much zeal. There weren't the Kalenjin tribal dancers. Kibaki, maybe he was the one who was sort of so laid back. He said, no, just let things. But we're seeing an insidious return, both from our leaders, our former prime minister, our current president, to come back to this idea of this is where I am, you've come to my thing, here are our singers, here is our music, here is our culture. I say no, we shouldn't do that. It's just a personal opinion. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and you use the word legislation. So what do you want the legislation to do or say? What are you legislating?
The legislation,
against?
My argument, because this is something that you said, bar room or locker room banter, this is a conversation that has been had. I think that a lot of what is wrong with our societies, or what could be remedied, is a rethinking of our educational system. I really think, having been a teacher all these years, that education counts for a lot. If you had the moral equivalent, say, for example, of busing, whatever they had, because other societies ought to, the whole idea of benchmarking is that you go somewhere, look at how you cook fufu and whatever, and I'm going to add turmeric to my thing. We've got to look at other societies who face the same problems and how they've dealt with them. They haven't got it completely right. The Americans can't be proud of how they've dealt with American Indians. There's some terrible stories to be told there.
Native Americans.
Native.
They're no longer called Red Indians.
American
Native.
Sorry, I apologize. I come from a time when that was the thing to say. I've caught up. But the point that I wish to make is that all these things have to be incremental. You're not, but you have an aim in sight. So, again, let us be personal, because I think being personal adds to the sincerity and the truth. I have blood relations in my family, maybe the most God-forsaken family of all Kenyans, but who've never made that trip to Nairobi, who are now in their 30s. Strange. They've never made the trip that's taken them to Kisumu. Now, those are tribal dudes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Now, you see, the thing is, if there are all these things, you can say we're going to ban boarding schools. There's a ripple effect. You know, people are burning them up and everything else. But boarding schools had one benefit, is that maybe some kid from Nyeri, the next door neighbor, was somebody who came from Karachuonyo. That intermarriage, it was a function of the kind of schooling in post-colonial Kenya, which I had, where we just had the Gashadi report and schools that were predominantly English, such as the one I went to, suddenly had to take in an intake of quotas. And by the time I got there in the mid-60s, we had a third Asian, a third African, a third European. So many years later, that same school is now 100% African black.
Yeah.
What do you call them now, CT? I don't know. What should I call them?
Correct.
Kenyan.
Yeah, Kenyan. Yeah. But you see, the point that I'm trying to make, good people, is that we've lost out on something. Because of having had that imposition of going to a school, okay, it was elitist. Okay, it was the dregs of, the imperialist colonial master. But I can still enter Indian South Pakistani homes unannounced for lunch to visit my old cronies from school.
Because of
the
that
people who were there at that particular school, because of that third, and then you take in the idea of the best from their particular regions, they were Kalenjin, they were any perceivable person was in that school. And it stayed with me forever. So I can actually say some of my best friends are, that one?
Yeah.
Some of my best friends are, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so was it a bad thing? That something that was a melting pot, that was a mélange, and there again, were we allowed to sort of like break off and, gas away and whatever we'd found out in groups of three? Even if you went to Alliance Boys, all these things in the colonial, you were not allowed to speak your... Now, we go back, Eric, to the thing, was it good or was it bad in the long term? Where I just consider you, CT, as my friend. Not my friend from where do you come from, but my friend. Because
we spent 4 years together.
We played whatever together. We ate the same school food together. I realize that you're far cleverer than me and you're the nuclear physicist. So I can't say that because I'm what I am. These are all leveling things. It's the same thing about a parent going to a school where you have girls all by themselves and boys all by themselves. Ultimately, one worked out that if boys and girls make up a society, the ideal school has to have these people interacting from an early age so that a girl can find out that she's better than maths. So it's this whole idea of integration, Eric. Integration.
Let's go to the phone lines. I've got two callers on the line. One is John from Elbagon. John, good morning.
Morning. How are you guys?
Fine, thanks.
I can't agree more with my namesake, John Chibu Kumo, about legislation. And the current structure that we have in this country, the constitution, because it has actually institutionalized the tribalism. Because now, any interview you go to, especially like even the IBC interviews which are going on, the first thing somebody is asked, and which is a very critical point, where do you come from? Very critical. Even the judges' interview, they were being asked, where do you come from? And I remember after the Chief Justice was announced, there is a judge who wanted to be a Deputy Chief Justice, but he had to pull out because the Chief Justice then was from the same tribe. And I was asking myself, are we using our tribes to judge people, or is it our abilities? Because it's like the tribe is coming first and then ability. We ask people, where do you come from first, before we even know their abilities. So I agree with John Sibiokum that we need to legislate and even remove such conditions that the way we are saying, and we really make it so fancy that we are making this thing that everybody in the country should be in a particular place. But
John,
actually we have, yes.
There's a this idea of tribalism in my mind is part of a concept, huh?
Yes.
And the concept goes insofar as a certain term that is universally accepted. It is called affirmative action.
Yes.
When you consider the 2/3 gender rule, okay?
Yeah. Yes.
It's affirmative action.
Yeah.
If you go back to history, you talk about district focus. It was affirmative action. And why? There was a recognition that there are certain parts of the country that had been marginalized and didn't have the same benefits as others. Call it a colonial legacy, call it whatever you want to call it, but there was that. I'm simply saying this subject of discussion is complex. It's complex because the very things that sometimes we set out to do, maybe the unintended consequences is the negative aspects of ethnicity that we keep seeing. And yet that may not have been the initial purpose of it. The initial purpose was to try and benefit people who ordinarily would not have benefited from, say, for instance, you're talking about the county government system, a centralized system, certain people got neglected. So what do? You end up with the county system so that no one can say that they have been left behind, that benefits that accrue from what we call development has been taken to them. And then again, you now cocoon people into tribal areas, larger areas, but again. And if you go to the counties, depending on who's governor, they'll even tell you, this clan benefits more than the other because the governor comes from there, and so forth. So the discussion is always an ongoing one. But the reason is because sometimes, if you look at it, those who get into positions of leadership have never embraced that broader thinking of what we're discussing here, so that everybody seems to benefit. And you know why? Because our social structure is such that, for instance, you, John, wherever you are, if you're in a position of employment and people do not view you as somebody who supports your community, how will you be viewed? We'll discuss it. Yes.
That's why it needs to be legislated, so that it's not left to an individual decision. It's not left to your own will.
Because
but
on
it
your
is
own,
in
you
the
will
law.
make the decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if it is legislated, then you have no choice but to do it. And a good example you have given, city in the county. The counties, I believe that the law says that you are supposed to employ at least a third from outside the county. But how many counties are doing that? Everybody is employing within the county.
Is that law even considered? Do people even talk about it?
But it is there. It is there in the law.
Yes, it is. And I'm simply saying it's been legislated. It's there.
Yes.
So I'm questioning, yes, legislation plays an important role, but is legislation the thing that actually gets people to change the way they look at things and the way they would like to do things?
Definitely,
yes. It is a beginning. It is a beginning.
Definitely.
It is
a start point. Thank you, John. Let's hear from Ed. Ed, good morning.
Morning to you. How are you doing, guys?
Fine, thank you.
Fine, thank you.
Now, here's the thing. The one thing that I can say that makes us Kenyan is we're a hypocritical and myopic brand of people.
Why?
Hypocritical in the sense, as you were saying, during sport events, tuko wa Kenya. During something was like maybe something that's happening that's Kenyan, like for example, whatever happened at the Safari Rally, it involved the country. That time we are Kenyan. But come elections, political factions, even in the community, small leadership positions in the community, that's when you start knowing that, hey, I'm not Kenyan, I'm Kikuyu.
But Ed,
can I
ask you a question,
yes,
Ed?
Ask.
The example you've given, does it not also show that we are actually capable of coalescing around something and we are capable of just being Kenyans?
As I had said earlier, yes, it does. The problem is, I just used the word myopic. In our minds, we're so myopic in the sense that people don't see that even if I involve someone else from my community, it is the progress of our country. No. The myopia just shows them that Nisasa. Let us think of now, whatever else is going to happen later, itajililia. But for now, let me think of my community, our community. And that is why you see, even for example, this BBR process that was going on. Most counties, and I'm sorry to say, but that's the truth, most counties which were passing, the county assemblies which are passing the BBI, they were doing it because a certain leader from their community has okayed or has said no to it. It depended with who and with who is saying. And if you look at maybe even the highest political leaders that we have, those kingpin leaders that we have, they are not based on ideologies. No, they are based on political factions and communities.
Yeah.
Me being Gitonga Kikuyu, I cannot go to Siaya and vie for a parliamentarian seat.
You actually can. It's just that you won't get elected, but you can vie.
Yes, I can. But okay, then instead of wasting resources, so to speak, I'd rather stay to Nyeri and Nanyuki.
Well, it's mainly because you haven't interacted with the people in Siaya. Those that live within the community. Junet Mohammed has been elected in a Luo dominant community. Why? Because he has lived with them. He is part of the community.
Shakil
Shabir the same. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. So even in Nyeri, you cannot leave Nyeri today, Ed, and go to Muranga and be elected governor. Those are Kikuyus such as yourself.
Remember, in the North Rift, we even have an MP, Dr. Mirza.
Yeah.
A Kenyan of Asian origin. Yes. Meru.
Actually, even in Meru they do have. Yes. But the thing is, those are the chosen few.
No, those are the examples that we can actually be accepted irrespective of our natural ethnicity.
Exactly. Anyway, have a good day.
You too, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
What is the issue with ethnicity? Because it sounds to me like we want to criminalize language and tribe by saying, let's legislate this. Where is the problem? Why don't we just start from there? Like we're saying, we live with one another. We have gone to school with one another. We trade with one another until a certain point when political discussions come up, and that's when it becomes an issue.
I think it's a tool that's kept aside to be used whenever you have. It's really like your proverbial toolbox that you're not really going to use it every day, but you reserve the right to pull something out and use it for some kind of violence later. That even though you may not practice it on a daily basis, when I see you like sitting down and having a drink, I'm not thinking. It's not really in my foreview right then where you are, where you're from. But when things do get a little bit sticky, I reserve the right to pull out that tool. And I think it's used as a vicious tool, knowing that I can call upon it at some point to use it when things seem a bit sticky or appear to be a bit sticky.
Why only at that particular point? I'll try and answer that question, which I'm asking. Because our politics is not just people getting elected. No, it represents great benefit.
Yeah.
I'm going back to that word. It represents great benefit. The higher the office, the higher the benefit.
It's our history that's determining all this.
Yes.
It's because historically, like you said, one president, it's a certain group of people who will entertain him. Then development seems to go to a certain region, which is, comprised of people who speak the same language as.
Or another president comes in, doesn't support those dancers, but you get the distinct impression that people who come from his community seem to be benefiting a great deal more in terms of visible appointments, in terms of etc., etc., etc. So that becomes the reality from which we view tribalism.
But that's only one angle, though. There's the other angle that if we speak the reality of things, a girl goes home and says, I have met a man and I'd like to come and introduce this man to you, mom. And the mom asks, what's the name of the young man? And just the name alone. That's it. I do not want those people in my home. That's not a politician.
No. But you see, politics, as you correctly put it, doesn't just talk about, it doesn't just point us to, it doesn't just introduce the aspect of certain economic benefits. No. With the benefits, when you talk about benefits, it will mean there are those who benefit, there are those who don't. So you demonize that entire process. So if I belong to the group that feels that I have been marginalized, I will find somebody to blame for my marginalization. And again, it's the political process that brings that about. So suddenly, if somebody comes from a certain community and they represent something that I consider has brought me harm, perceive.
Eric,
yes.
People with a certain way of thinking will just, it seems unkind, but they'll just simply die out. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because the mother, I'm of a certain age. There was a point where you could never contemplate a black Kenyan lad marrying an Indian stroke South Asian girl. But in the last so many years, it's happening.
Yep.
There were people, so many generations there. I could still name, but it's embarrassing. The sort of first Luo man to marry a Kikuyu woman. It's in the history books. But you know what I'm saying? These are names which are names. But good people, we want to move beyond this. We want to get ahead of this. So when we discuss, Eric, what it is to be Kenyan, there's another thing that we must be wary of. And I'm not sort of being a Marxist scholar or whatever, but the whole idea of class and social stratification. Don't say Kenyans feel or Kenyans are appalled. You should go ahead and say Kenyans of a certain stratum are appalled. Kenyans of a certain... there is a have and a have-nots. Hence the hustler versus whatever entitled thing that we're having now. There are people who are worth 30 billion Kenya shillings upon their death, and some who are living on less than $2 a day. So don't fancify the whole thing and say Kenyans feel, Kenyans are appalled. The Kenyans on Twitter are not all Kenyans. They're the Kenyans who can be on Twitter.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So let's go back, and then you spread that to the idea of the benevolent society. What jurisdiction are we going to create where every Kenyan, despite their material circumstances, is going to derive some benefit from the society that they live in? They can find that if their kid is ill, there is a nearby clinic where they'll have at least preliminary checkup to find out XYZ. Within walking distance, there's a lad in Turkana who's got his cows. Maybe he's a pastoralist. How are you going to educate people who are forever on the move? Are you going to tell them to stop and just stay there to go to school? Or are you going to have schools that are dotted about? But all this is legislation. Because if you don't do that, a society that has always seen themselves as moving the Maasai, there's a point where they probably thought the whole of Kenya is theirs. Why? Because they graze from the shores of Lake Victoria to the coast, therefore this is our land. It cannot be sustained. So you have to say, well, things have changed. We're now a sovereign nation. These are our boundaries. Does Maasai land still belong to all Maasais? There's no individual ownership. Those are decisions to be made by the people. And those are the changes that within a society we should be seeking to implement. Not just to come out with a new blueprint and say this one worked until 2010, now get rid of it, call it CCQ, BBI, change it. It can't be right.
Time for a break, 26 minutes to 10. Let's hear from you, 0719-012-600 and SpiceFM KE, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. And the question that we're having is, should we legislate, outlaw, using of ethnic languages in public places? So we promote one Kenyan society. 25 to 10. Time for a break. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.
Thank you.
The political class, the contestants, everybody is trying to outsteal the other.
Remorse is not taught in any school. Manners is something you get from your mother. You don't get it from your political party.
Why are we so unfocused as a country? Why are we spending money and resources, yet we have real challenges in this country?
This coronavirus pandemic should teach us one thing, that universal healthcare is critical. Because at this point, whether you have a medical card that covers you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
right, light rain in certain parts of Nairobi at 15, highs of 19 and lows of 14 today. 13 will be the low in Nyeri, where it's also raining at 14, highs of 20. Mostly sunny conditions at 16 in Nakuru, going to highs of 23. 21 will be the high in Eldoret. It's also raining at 16. Mostly cloudy conditions at 22 in Kisumu, highs of 27 and lows of 19. And it's also raining in Kakamega now at 22. 15 will be the low with highs of 25. 28 will be the high in Mombasa. It continues to rain at 26, and it's at 27 in Malindi with rain showers as well, going to highs of 28. Partly sunny conditions looking out of Kenya into Kampala at 23 with highs of 26. It'll come down to lows of 18, and it's mostly cloudy in Dar es Salaam with highs of 29 and lows of 22. Sunny at 10 in Johannesburg, warming up ever so slightly. 16 will be the high and lows of 7. And rain showers in Lagos now at 25, highs of 30, lows of 24. 21 will be the low in a sunny Kinshasa, currently at 20. And we're looking at mostly sunny conditions into early evening in Beijing, highs of 32 and lows of 22. It's 16 degrees and sunny in Paris with highs of 23. It'll come down to lows of 14. Mostly cloudy in London at 16 with highs of 23. It'll come down to lows of 15. There's a warning of flash floods in New York at 26. It's clear for now with highs of 29. It'll come down to lows of 22.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
Right, so that nasty accident that took place on the southern bypass today, just around the site on Mombasa Road, Mombasa Road bound, it's now causing some serious traffic in and outbound on the expressway. So this one you have to look out for. We're also looking at increased traffic right around that northern bypass outer ring area coming towards the Donholm Exchange. Those are the two spots that we're seeing that are really bad this morning and continue to be for some time. Let's watch out for that, shall we? Spice FM KE through the morning. Text 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Muga, Eric Latif, Nduoko, and our guest host today, John Sibiokumu. He has authored a book. It's a collection of the plays that he's written in a period between 2004 and 2014, put together into a book. He'll tell us about that as we continue the conversation today. Who qualifies as a Kenyan? Greek Ojaka on Twitter says, who's a Kenyan? What aspects define Kenyanhood? What is our ethos? You'll find that people more readily identify as the tribe than nation. And he goes on to say, as P.L.O. Lumumba says, most African nations are comprised of sub-nations called tribe, forced together by colonially drawn boundaries. This is then exploited to advance selfishness and greed. Alfred says, tribe is part of creation. You can never ignore it. It's a pattern that beautifies existence. English itself is the language of a tribe in England. So is Kiswahili, etc., etc. So who qualifies to be a Kenyan? And what is this that then defines us as one people, as one nation, as Kenyan?
Eric, let's go back to an image that I gave you. How many of us Kenyans, how many of us Nigerians, how many of us Ghanaians have sought to have citizenship elsewhere?
Many.
And I will pursue that by saying part of the reason that you wanted to key into a national identity, as Charles has rightly said, is that benefit, and let's call that the quality of life, is improved. So part of the reason is that in very kiddie terms, Kenya must be a good place to live. You're not going to take off from now here and say you want to go off to Yemen right now. It's not a good place to wish to go.
Syria.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or Syria. So part of the reason why the social fabric breaks down, look at what it takes as Africans to see, again, naming names, what has happened in a place like Ethiopia in the last couple of months. Now, if you read the papers, one of the headlines here said, the cost to rehabilitate the damage that's been done in those 3 months of fighting is half the cost of the new dam. The new dam that they're very controversial. Yes, exactly.
And this is the largest dam in Africa.
Yes, so it is. Whatever was joining. So part of the thing is the desire for peace, is also part of this idea of nationhood, that we can live peacefully together. And as you say, we can only live peacefully together when everybody feels. I'm agreeing with Charles. I think we're arguing the same point from different corners.
Really?
If the benefit to be derived is sufficient for us not to feel that we ought to go to war.
So it's equitable benefit.
Equitable is never going to be achieved in any society, but
yes, it can't be, but it's aspirational.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Incrementally.
Yes.
Working towards.
Yes.
Working towards.
Yes. Now that's where legislation helps, so that because if you leave it to human whim, there's anything that won't happen. But enforcement is made easier when there's a law that actually supports it.
So, in order to, what I'm seeing is that a situation then, in order to have a situation whereby the benefits, for example, because if you're just going to go across the line, the benefits of not being tribal, in order for those to be seen, you almost have to have like a quasi-forced situation, because you will not see those benefits if you leave people to their whims. You won't. So you have to create a situation whereby people can actually then see the benefits of not being tribal.
May I ask a question as the guest host? May I ask a question? I asked earlier on, what happens to people of other races who wish to be Kenyans, who see themselves as Kenyans, but are not, quote unquote, black Africans? Where do they stand in your analysis? Are they the 44th, 55th, 60th tribe? As Wazungus, as Wahindis?
Yep.
May I append a question to your question?
Yes, do.
Yes, I mean, because you are born in Kenya, you have a Kenyan ID, you have a Kenyan passport, but you are not black, Kenyan, African, black. Okay, where is your position? Because if you're talking about, legally speaking, you are Kenyan. But even more importantly, do you actually feel like a Kenyan? Is it something that is imbued upon you, something that you are, or is it something that you must fight for so that you can actually become a Kenyan?
So don't forget that those South Asian, within that collective, there are very many languages to be spoken in this language. You know, there's Punjabi, there's Gujarati, there's Hindi. So we want this idea of a national identity, a national identity. We have coalesced against Kipchoge Keino running really fast. We've coalesced against whatever, discovering M-Pesa. But have we coalesced around living together and sharing the day-to-day experience?
And holding hands?
Yes.
I guess we have.
Yes, we have.
I'm going to take you, okay, so step by step. Number one, in terms of the legal regime, yes. Because there's a law that says if you're born in Kenya, then you are Kenyan. One. Then we go into, even in the writing of our constitution, the current constitution, which acknowledges the mismatch in benefit sharing of the various communities in Kenya and seeks to address that by saying there shall be regional balance in appointments. There shall be this and the other. In every organization, there will be regional balance in the people who work in this organization, especially if it's for all public institutions. So it's trying to address that and acknowledging the fact that what CT was saying, there has been that mismatch in who is benefiting from the national cake and who is getting the basic services. So we've been moving towards that. Question is, like City is asking, do we all feel Kenyan, equally Kenyan?
No, we
or
don't.
are there
There's
some
an answer
people
to
who
that.
feel more Kenyan than others? And what is
There's
it
an
that
answer
makes
to
more
that.
people feel
Yes,
more
some
Kenyan
more
than
feel-
others?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
it because of their skin color? Is it because of the tribe that they come from?
A combination.
Okay.
A combination. We don't have to go through the mishmash of Kenyan history. We can go to a point where South Asians at some point in this country weren't allowed to farm.
Yep.
The colonialist says, don't farm, so don't go to the White Highlands because they're white and they're highlands and they're ours. And so what did they do? They went off into the industrial area and created a marvelous manufacturing industry. So you produce a billionaire. But post-independence, there was a great effort just basically to strip them of that property, not to compensate them in any shape, way, or form.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying in terms of a national identity, if you take what within a capital system I have taken years to accrue and to make mine, and you just take it away and say, Biashara Street, CT, that's your shop.
Yeah.
Will do. Take the one next door. And you have no idea how to balance the books. So there's a lot of rot that went on because they couldn't run the thing. So that's Historia. But, the thing is, one is very patriotic. But I think, there's another conversation. Beyond patriotism, I quite like the idea of being an African. Because the world defines all Africans as coming from one continent country. They never say Bill Clinton has gone to Uganda. No. He said he went to a trip to Africa. They never say he saw a giraffe in South Africa in Kruger National Park. He saw a giraffe in Africa. So that is the perception that the world has of us. The higher tier of expectation is for us to perceive ourselves as one and spend a lot of energy. So the controversial thing, again, my friend, the Ghanaian guy who said, you know what, we've been giving you guys these old cocoa to make Swiss chocolate for all these years. We're not giving you any more because we're going to make Ghanaian. That is legislation. From where I'm coming from, good move. Yeah. And it's those, because if we see ourselves as Africans, let's forget the Kenyan thing. If we see ourselves as African, the perception is that we are second, if not third rate in everything, and that we are perpetual learners. The only thing that we can do is to be taught by an expert who comes. Now, how long is that going to be sustained?
Actually, you're not just an expert even in your own country.
Yes.
And in things that are within your sphere.
Yes, exactly.
And this external individual is the expert. So you marvel and you wonder, how is this really possible?
So there's a link. It might look disparate, but there is a link between our conversation. The idea of expanding the sense of oneness that we have, and tribalism just happens to be one of the things that works against it. Then you have lack of employment, the creation of jobs. So that what are we going to do in my neck of the wood so that the people who've never been to Nairobi, remember them, can actually stay where they are and make a living.
But don't consider...
And enjoy everything that the person who's in Nairobi is enjoying.
The discussion about communities and tribalism, even as we talk about them, in our mind, yes, we know we're talking about tribes of Kenya, but we usually talk about the big tribes.
Yes.
The really big ones, the big five, so to speak. Okay.
And when you say big, we're talking in terms of number.
Oh, big.
Yes.
Big isn't anything other than numbers.
Right.
Yes. So,
but when you say
it's
big,
not tall.
No, it's not tall. It's not.
But also, when you say big, it's in the minds of others. Big equates to most important.
Superior. Yes, or prominent
superior.
In one way or the other.
Yes.
There's something that you must be doing that stands out. Now, why am I mentioning this? If you come from a Kenyan community that you are small in number, okay? Woe betide you.
Yes.
Because when people talk Kenyans, yes, you live in Kenya, you are not really considered. You're not part of actually that discussion. You're not included in it.
Right.
And when I say this, I'm saying, are we, as Kenyans, I belong to one of the larger communities, okay? Are we accommodating of some of our Kenyan brothers and sisters who are not...
Our minorities.
Yes, and
name.
One, they are minorities.
Racial and ethnic.
Racial, ethnic, yes. They are not my color. They don't have hair like mine.
Would legislation help that?
Legislation sets a benchmark.
Okay. Because legislation then also forces the government to uplift them, to consider the minorities.
For sure.
Yes.
Yes.
To bring them to the same level of the table as everybody else.
That's what the county system was supposed to. You know the discussion we keep having about the national government giving money to the counties.
Yes.
We wouldn't have these things.
And equalization fund and all.
We wouldn't have this discussion if it wasn't legislated. And the national government would have a field day just doing what they like. I mean, if you're asking for money, you can just keep asking. But now there's a basis for that asking. And you can say, excuse me, no. The way this thing works is this, and this is what you owe me, and this is what you should give me. And our politicians understand it, and that's why part of the discussion around the BBI is increasing this particular allocation that is supposed to go to the counties. But then, that is easy to understand. But the day-to-day relationship with those Kenyans who belong to these minority groups. You ask a Kenyan, black like me, ask them about a Kenyan Asian. What is their attitude towards them? Do they even understand them? Ask them about a white Kenyan.
They're visitors.
Yes, you even have a derogatory name. You even refer to them as, I will not mention it. A name that they don't particularly like because they're Kenyans, just like the rest of us.
Yep.
But do they feel they're Kenyans? Do they believe they're Kenyans like the rest of us?
Are they made to feel? Are they made to feel?
Thank you for saying it. Made to feel. Because if you ask me, I think they feel they're Kenyans. They know they're Kenyans.
It's
and
everybody
they're
else.
made to feel.
Everybody else treats them different.
Yes.
Interesting conversation there, John. Tell us about this book. The collection of plays that you've written in the 10 years. That's 10 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep. In the 10 years that put together into a book. What is it about this place? What stands out?
You have given me a marvelous opportunity, and I'm going to speak for 1 hour non-stop.
Please do.
Eric, I think the acknowledgement of the fact of this being a great leap forward is that my book has a foreword by Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. It has an introduction by Margareta Wagasheru, and it has an afterword by Professor Yashpal Gai.
But do you say?
So at the back of it, we've got Anne Manyara, Pasalelo Kantai, Giorgio Rido. These are the spokespeople. As I say, the cover illustration done by Gado has me as a pen dipping into an inkwell of Kenya. And the idea, I try to explain one story. You can see a comedy called Meetings, where there is a mistaken identity, where, for instance, you are the spitting image of, let's say, Kalonzo Musyoka or some prominent politician. You're the complete lookalike, but you're an absolute thug. And when you go into a village, everybody recognizes you as Mheshimiwa. It's a satire. We can go into the idea of what's going to be given to you. Do you want women? Put them on. Do you want Yamachoma? So that plays itself out. That's like funny, but funny in a. Then I wrote a play, again with Kenya in mind, with a character who leaves the country just after the 1982 coup, and he goes off and he goes to Tanzania. He's fleeing, goes to Norway, goes to the States, and come back to Kenya so many years later because he believes that in the election of 2012, 2013, things have changed and he can return. But he has to reconcile with the secret agent who ratted on him at the university campus for him to go to jail because his son wants to marry the daughter of the woman he left pregnant when he fled.
Whoa.
So there's the whole thing. And there's, again, this idea that we're discussing how meetings, how are these people going to go beyond this, because their children in Romeo and Juliet type fashion wish to come together and get married. So there's one, so that's the theme. Kagea, there's the great Kapenguria 6, Bildad Kagea, and there was the great standoff, basically an ideological standoff between, they were all in jail together, between what Kagea felt and what Jomo Kenyatta felt Kenya should become. So again, in a historical perspective, the big debate, basically socialist, leftist, social democracy versus rampant capitalism is dealt in that. With dinner at Her Excellency's, we have a group of people going to an ambassador's house discussing the 2010 constitution. They're invited by an ambassador and they say, Chapter 1, it says, Almighty God, do you really believe in, what's this about cherishing your foods? So we're unpacking that. And in elements, again, to bring in the minorities, there is a woman whose father was an Indian worker who met an African girl when the railway got to Kisumu and conceived her. Then he pays for her education. She goes abroad and becomes a writer. So she's Kenyan by root, by thing, but what has become her identity when she's gone into the outside world. So I'm not writing love stories. I'm not writing criminal stories. Who killed the butler? I'm writing politically. Again, we have to walk on the shoulders of giants. I just think what I'm able to do now that Ngugi and Imbuga and Mailu and all these people were not able to do is to name names.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the Kagia Kenyatta scene is a scene. You can read it, and everybody who was there at the time is the Kenyatta said to Kagia, look, everybody else is buying farms. My ministers set up a bus company. What are you doing for yourself? So it's a famous... I read an autobiography. It's a famous thing, but it brings into perspective what it's all about. So there's 6 of them in all, and the other thing that they do really well is to bring pictures of the actors and actresses who were in them, so that we will see one of my actors was the late Lorna Irungu, the late Janet Kanini, the late Sam Otieno, the late Harry Ebale. Every play is followed by a set of 6 black and white pictures, which again we've never done with our theatre. And sadly, it's not a book where everybody can dash off and buy them all now and make me a multimillionaire immediately after this program, because there's a slight impediment. For the moment, they are all only the preserve of the publishers. Jahazi Press is an offshoot of a bookshop in Nairobi called Prestige. There are only 2 Prestiges, one next to City Hall and one in Lavington. So since the book was launched last Friday, June the 25th, we are working out foreign travel, dissemination throughout the land. There are people who apparently deliver books, but so far it's available at Prestige.
Thank you very much.
And when you go there, you'll find out how much it costs. I won't go that fast to pump the price. Make the effort. Go, see the book, buy it.
Go and get the book for yourself. Thank you very much, John, for joining us today. It's been interesting. Rather interesting having the conversations with you. Come back someday soon.
I shall when I've written another 6 plays.
All right. City, today's proverb.
A deaf ear is followed by death. An ear that listens is followed by blessings.
CT, has anybody on this program said to you as a guest, say, oh, shut up, we don't want to be told what to do? Has you ever that kind of... Has anybody been
listen, I will not listen.
A bit of advice. Because you're working on the premise that we should all pay heed to these proverbs. It's a very suspect notion.
John,
we should all listen. Oh,
what John has just done is he to all our listeners, he has just shown them the way to ensuring that he never comes back to this program so long as I'm on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been such fun.
Asante sana.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting an artist stroke creative. Do more of the same. There are lots of us.
We will. We shall. Thank you for tuning in to the Situation Room today and for participating in the conversations via social media, by calling in, or just by sitting there and listening and nodding or shaking your head, whatever. Join us again tomorrow. It'll be the second Friday of the week. It's now 10 a.m. Have a lovely day.